Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro, and it's time for 2026 Oscar predictions. And I just want to remind you, you can make 2026 Oscar predictions in Award Expert on the app and the Play Store.
I'm interrupting this program of me to bring you me, telling you there is now a way to sport the best prediction app ever created. We're Award Expert. With Award Expert Plus, this is a subscription tier, and among other things, I allow you to make your own custom awards events and lists with your own slots and your own categories. Not only will your support help cover existing costs, it will help us grow Award Expert to a sustainable venture so I can work on this full time. I've already quit my job. We're working at a deficit at the moment. If you have a subscription or would like to try in the future, please let me know your feedback in the message to the developer portal, and I will do my best to make the subscription worth it for you. But together, we can create the best predictions app powered by you and your suggestions, and there's much more to come. And have a good day.
What's generally your philosophy around approaching early predictions? So I'm just going to get people set up with the right expectations here. Sometimes I think we've gotten the most was 5 out of 10. 6? I think we got 6 out of 10
There was
one year where it was like all the expected contenders, basically, yeah. So last year I noted that it would be more difficult to get a high number of movies early in the year, and that was absolutely true. Nickel Boys, Dune, Conclave. Okay, so we got 3 out of 10 last year. That's because last year we did not have a lot of films from like a Spielberg or a Martin Scorsese that are just shoo-ins. Those films are what you want to put at the top of your list. The films where you're like, hey, even if it's 50-50, you got to throw in films like Babylon, even though they could tank. For the most part, my strategy here is, if I think something has a 50% chance, I'm putting it in. And I don't think it's worth trying to predict what could win, or like, oh, there might be a narrative that this thing could win. Like,
no, I'm going to talk about that for one of these.
That's why my number one's the number one, buddy. All right.
One battle after another.
This is the new PTA film. Huge budget, blockbuster movie inspired by movies like Repo Man. It's kind of sci-fi comedy, but heavy on action. Like, it is a extravaganza of like action and car chases.
It's going to be a car chase movie in the way that like, you know, stuff like Repo Man, and Repo Man had a bit of a sci-fi element too.
Maybe it'll be compared to Mad Max. Maybe it'll be so many car chases it gets compared to Mad Max.
I think that this movie is going to try to recapture the charm of older car chases in films and like the art of the car chase that is kind of lost now in movies like Fast and Furious. It is also loosely based on a Pinchon novel,
but it's very, very loosely adapted from that.
Right, but it's adapted in a way where it will update the politics to reflect the modern day. So I think that the main contention here could be if the politics are on the nose in a way that people just kind of rubs people the wrong way, or they don't love it.
And for example, Sean Penn is playing a Nazi in this film.
Yeah. Leonardo DiCaprio's character's name is Ghetto Pat, which is wonderful. The cast is awesome. You have Regina Hall and Teyana Taylor. Like, I'm so excited for those two performances. It's gonna have a great ensemble. I think it's gonna be really funny. The action is gonna bring in a big crowd. I think the big crowd, the reason that he can get all this money is because Leonardo DiCaprio's in it and he's such a movie star.
Think about Leonardo DiCaprio's impact on Oscar films of recent years. Here's the last bunch of his movies: Killers of the Flower Moon, Don't Look Up, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, The Revenant, Wolf of Wall Street, The Great Gatsby, Django Unchained, J. Edgar, Inception.
It's insane.
There's like 5 in a row right now. And then before that, it's like every other film. He's working with every huge director. So just his name alone is enough to bring in box office for a project that, you know, maybe normally would be a little off the beaten path. But also, the genre here seems extremely accessible. Like,
it might be a
car chase movie with Leonardo DiCaprio.
It might be a crowd pleaser.
It sounds unlike any film PTA has done, but in a way that, for me, leans more towards like, oh yes, this could be more of an audience hit.
And there's no way, I think, that the movie will be only an audience hit, only a commercial play, and not translate to critical or Oscars adoration. Like, you gotta understand something. I know that PTA has had a couple bumpy hits along the way towards Oscars, but I think at this point he is going to be a staple unless his movie's just totally divisive. If you talk to Academy members and you ask them their favorite movies, like Letterboxd does, they always mention PTA's movies. Like, people are obsessed with him. He's totally getting... I think that the love for him as a filmmaker can get this movie into Best Picture, even if it's in the bottom half. if it's super
I think
divisive.
he's kind of like Tarantino on that level, where, you know, every now and then, you know, maybe there's like the Hateful Eight. Except that for Anderson, the films that aren't successful with Oscars tend to be the more esoteric, I suppose.
That's not going to be this one.
No, this is like the opposite.
I don't care that it's an action comedy.
And here's the thing. There's a bunch of acting plays here. Sean Penn as like a raging Nazi could very well do well with awards.
And then
supporting
either
actor.
or both of Teyana Taylor or Regina Hall, I think, are going to be really.
I think
really
somebody's going to go in supporting actress.
He has 11 nominations. If this gets picture, director, screenplay, he'll have 14 nominations, and he's going to win one of them. I'm so sorry. If he's getting into all 3 of those categories, he's going to win one. Adapted screenplay is easier than original, I think. And even director, like, this is his biggest scale movie, like the most money he's been given. That's a perfect opportunity for him to win Best Director.
Be a nice opportunity for Johnny Greenwood to get an Oscar as well. For
I agree. Now, it's idealistic because we've wanted it for a long time, but I also have seen the last few years how like Oppenheimer and Anora were celebrations of like the filmmaker so much of their campaign, and why couldn't this movie hit in the same way?
I think there's no good reason to not have this in, because any argument I'd make against it is that like, oh, maybe it'd be too weird, but it doesn't sound weird. It sounds like audience friendly.
So number 2, I have Marty Supreme. There's certainly reasonable doubt that this being a Safdie film, you know, their past
just
films
Josh
have been very
Safdie.
good.
It's the first time that both the Safdie brothers are splitting up. They each have their own movies. Benny Safdie has The Smashing Machine. Josh Safdie has Marty Supreme. Marty Supreme seems to be the bigger film of all of them. Not just because of the cast, but because A24 is apparently putting down more money for this film than they have for any film. They're also releasing it during, I think, Christmas, around that time.
It's got a Christmas release date.
So it's clearly like a box office play, and it's not just an awards film festival push.
It's also a period film. Like, it takes place in the 50s.
It's described as a sports adventure comedy drama film.
So it's been compared to like Catch Me If You Can, Wolf of Wall Street, kind of a big, epic, fun romp. If A24 is throwing $70 million into a period film where Timothée Chalamet is leading, who's kind of approaching that like Leonardo DiCaprio consistency of awards players, I don't see how it's not an awards contender. They have planted a Christmas release for it. Timmy's a huge box office draw at this point, my God. It definitely feels like he has a great shot for another Oscar nomination. You have like these Hollywood royalty weirdo roles where like Gwyneth Paltrow's in it and Fran Drescher is in it, who's the president of SAG, mind you. This movie could get a SAG Ensemble nomination, wouldn't be that hard. Like, I just don't think it's gonna be Uncut Gems levels of like screechiness and off-puttingness. Like with PTA's film, if they're putting up a lot of money for it, they expect it to be a crowd pleaser, okay? I think if you look at this and you say, oh, Safdie, I'm a little skeptical, I just don't think you're looking closely enough at what this is.
Well, for someone who is skeptical, and it's totally fair to be skeptical of every film on this list at this point, I think their other films have been more of crime films in a sense. And in general, like, crime genres seem to be an Oscar campaign killer. Like when David Fincher does a crime movie, it won't get nominations, but then when he does a non-crime movie, it does.
Darius Khondji is also doing the cinematography, so Josh grabbed the more Oscar-friendly cinematographer on this one. Jack Fisk is doing the production design as well. Like, it's crazy. Right?
Yeah, it just seems like it's gearing up to be a really, really good film, and one that any movie fan should be very excited for. And Uncut Gems was still like one of the most buzzy and talked about films of the year. It was just probably too screechy, and this film might not have that problem. It has a greater scope. It's not just a movie about an unlikable guy like running around and screaming in New York City. It has more of a story. So Wicked for Good, if we're going off of what is a 50% chance or greater, easily Wicked for Good fits into that territory. I mean, everybody is excited for part 2, and as long as it's very good, it will be nominated. Now, I think it's kind of genius for them also to throw in 2 new original songs to get people excited and invigorated, thinking, okay, well, we've already seen Defying Gravity, like maybe that's like the show. Hopefully these songs are gonna be bangers.
No, this is the thing for me. Most people think that the second half of Wicked isn't as good. The best songs in Wicked, everyone thinks are popular in Defying Gravity. Also, the second acts of plays, I think, are usually a little bit shorter. And so this is a perfect opportunity to expand, give each of the main characters a big moment and really flesh that out. And honestly, I know, although I have criticisms for Wicked Part 1, I saw the intentionality with making it longer and diving a little bit deeper into certain moments. And I think people will like the second act a lot. I think that they'll be surprised
by maybe how they liked it more than they thought they would. It's possible also that maybe with the full story complete, those flaws kind of start to settle in for people. Whereas with the first film, I think it was so about like the excitement, and it didn't have to answer all the threads in order to get you to like it. And you can be forgiving about it because there's going to be a little more room to forgive. Yeah, there's also a little bit more room to fail in a way.
First film definitely showed its intention to like you said, dive really deep into those characters, and they expanded their little like personal spiritual moments in that ending Defying Gravity scene, which was extended like at least double the length of the original song. I don't have a good reason to doubt Wicked for Good. Also, it's not like they're packing it in, taking a summer break, and then going back into it. It literally was shot back to back. It is actually a part 2 of the same production. So if you thought the first half was slapping, I don't know where like the second half would really go wrong for you.
Maybe they could even crush the blacks a little bit more on the color grade for this one.
The problem that people are anticipating is like, okay, well, Dune Part 2 was better than Dune Part 1, did significantly worse in terms of awards. Now, that is a real problem. However, Dune Part 2 had a March release date last year, so it came out way too early, and people seem to think, you know, well, those are the Dune movies, and I really like them, but it's more important that we nominate, like, the substance this year. Like, it doesn't feel important. It didn't feel vital. Part of it is because of the early release date, but also part of it is because, like, it's the second time you're doing it.
I think it's going to hurt in some categories, though.
I think it's going to hurt,
I don't think this is going to get score and editing again unless it's actually, like, legitimately a bigger contender than the first to win.
I don't think it's going to get 10 nominations again. I mean, this one overperformed. Like, I think Wicked Part 2, you know, it'll perform something like Dune Part 2 or Avatar 2. It will get nominated for Best Picture. And then nominations other than that, and like the ones that it won, costume, production design, I think, and then a couple song nominations. Everything else is kind of up in the air, and unfortunately, I would include the actors in that. Like, they're not as guaranteed because this is the second time around, because the second half of a performance. But I don't really have a good reason to not include them in my predictions at the moment.
Well, again, if you're going for 50-50, then sure, yeah.
The focal point of the first Wicked was these performances are so great. Wicked for Good, definitely in the top 10.
Bugonia. Hey, it always is a good idea to predict a Focus Features film, and I guess there are 2 this year with Hamnet and Bugonia, but I don't have any reason to doubt Bugonia.
This is a Yorgos Lanthimos film adapted from a Korean film called Save the Green Planet, which we watched in anticipation of this film. And Save the Green Planet is really good. And that film, honestly, like, it left me no doubt that Yorgos Lanthimos was going to do a great job with this. Like, the source material is fantastic. It's entertaining. It's bizarre. It kind of goes to like heights that you wouldn't expect. It's also like a really solid satire. Like, it wasn't just this goofy film.
I think that people are looking at the original film and they're saying, this is super wacky, super goofy, the weird sci-fi elements, people wearing like crazy helmets, and they're thinking maybe this will be too much. And while the original in its form would never get nominated for the Oscars, I fully do trust that Yorgos Lanthimos and Will Tracy, who is the writer of The Menu, will make this satire film very palatable to audiences who have loved Lanthimos' other films like Poor Things. And this is not weirder than Poor Things. Early in the year, the conversation around Poor Things was, would this really push them away? It did not!
I also just didn't think that the original film was so goofy that it wasn't meant to be taken seriously. It was very clearly serious about its themes. Also, there's a lot of room to like introduce that satire about capitalism. What do we always say about the Lanthimos films? We weren't even close to predicting Kinds of Kindness last year. You know, you're not just like blindly like, oh, we don't know what Yorgos Lanthimos is gonna make, if it's gonna be good, because he's hit or miss. Like, no. Kinds of Kindness, it was written by Lanthimos and Ephilimos Philippou. And whenever they write films together, those films are fucking weird. They have that dark comedic sensibility where every line delivery is like deadpan, dry. The characters may as well have had their brains transplanted and then like been inserted back into their bodies from like sheep brain. And so we knew that Kinds of Kindness was going to have that tone, and it did. And it was not even...
It was also an anthology film. The fact that it's wacky, that I think is what the normies want from Lanthimos. They're like, oh, you're so weird, Yorgos. Like, we love how weird and wacky you are.
I think this is give people what they much more like Poor Thing. I think it's easy to see the pattern of which ones don't do well from Lanthimos and which ones do.
Emma Stone is the CEO which is a gender swap from the original.
Yeah.
And then Stavros Halkias is Jesse Plemons' like accomplice. And maybe Alicia Silverstone will be very good in this. Number 5, we're going with After the Hunt. Also, very understandable that you might think, nope, I am not falling for it this time. I'm not predicting a new Luca Guadagnino film. Bones and All got nothing. Suspiria got nothing.
Challengers got
Challengers
nothing.
and Queer got nothing.
Queer got nothing. Yeah.
Okay.
Crazy.
So I
streak.
understand. Like, I totally get it, bro. I have 3 main points of argument. The script has floated around. People have read it. They say it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Based on a fantastic script.
And I did skim through it, and it strikes me like a character-driven drama, kind of like Tar. It has a similar subject matter. It's about a college professor played by Julia Roberts. One of her students, played by Ayo Edebiri, accuses one of her colleagues of a dark secret, in quotes. And it's a lot about like Julia Roberts' relationship to her own past, and that's why I think it's kind of like Tar, because we're like kind of reckoning with like, who is this person? What's she hiding? And I just think the script seems very meaty. Like, my impression was that this is not going to be bizarre. It's going to be pretty straightforward and just a straightforward kind of drama. My impression is that this film is more Oscar tipped than all of Guadagnino's films that we just mentioned. I mean, Queer was fucking weird, surreal, based on a book that people didn't know what the hell to make of that. Challengers was like a young people sports movie.
Bones and All is also a young people, like, cannibal movie.
Like, this is just a drama.
You think Julia Roberts isn't getting nominated for this? I challenge you to leave her out.
There are some early word that this is like the best performance she'll.
No, the early word is that like easily she's like in winning conversation instantly for this. Also, what a great comeback, because most people are thinking, where's Julia Roberts
been nominated for a while? I also think Ayo Edebiri and Andrew Garfield have some solid chances in their respective supporting categories, especially Edebiri.
Edebiri is somebody I'm sure the Oscars would love an opportunity to nominate.
I mean, I'm trying to imagine like what is a way in which Luca Guadagnino could make this or like stylize it and then it doesn't really like hit with the Oscars. Maybe if it feels like a kind of Gone Girl, like David Fincher movie.
I feel like his style is not going to be that obtrusive here, but it also doesn't seem to really have his usual themes of like sensuality in here. And so maybe the Academy will actually be more warm to this film because it's a little bit less like Guadagnino flavored. And the third reason that I have that I think is really good is that you can't really find another Amazon MGM contender that's as likely as this. It just seems like this is the very clear one. And look, we predicted Women Talking and Nickel Boys early on in the year. They barely squeezed in, but you know, they were like the Amazon contenders.
The main argument here, honestly, for me, is Julia Roberts being like a lock for Best Actress.
Julia Roberts,
if she's truly a lock, and then I could see screenplay coming along, because why wouldn't it for a film like this? Even if the film gets good reactions, but not amazing, yet Julia Roberts and Ayo Edebiri are coming along for nominations, I think that gets screenplay. I think that gets picture in a year of 10.
But the next film on my list is Michael. You can't acknowledge this movie or assess its chances without first understanding that this is going to make more than $1 billion and will be bigger than Bohemian Rhapsody.
In terms of box office, in terms of sensation.
I can't promise that people are going to like it more, but the adoration for Michael Jackson, like, he is absolutely deified by people.
Yeah.
I think it's
apparently
a greater
they're expecting
level.
great returns in China as well.
Oh.
Like, he's like it's not just an American phenomenon, right?
That's why it's making more. That's why Lionsgate expects that this will make between $1 to $2 billion.
These music biopics seem to capture people's attention. Like, they're some of the only films that can be like, original, non-IP, that can make like hundreds of millions at the box office. And that, also double as awards movies.
Yeah, they definitely register to people as movies to look out for awards. A lot of people will be saying, well, is there too much controversy around this person?
Yeah, which is absolutely fair. I've been debating this so much.
I think a lot of people don't know whether or not he did what was accused of him and what was said in the Finding Neverland documentary. I think that there's a poll that maybe about 50% of people believe that, but I don't know how much people will care. I honestly just think that people might not care because they just want to celebrate Michael Jackson more than they want to think about this stuff.
Imagine like watching the full movie. You know, this thing's going to be 3 hours. Like, I'm just convinced it's going to be 3, maybe even 3.5 hours. You know, I mean, you can't reduce a man to just those actions. Like, look at this womb to tomb life of his and his struggles with outlet, with drugs, and with his father. Like, their attention's not going to be lasered in on that issue. And the internet might try to laser people's attention in there, but guess what happens when you attempt to do that?
You get flooded with hate.
And no matter what platform you're on, you're going to get absolutely slammed by people who are saying, no, the media just has something out for Michael Jackson. They just hate him. It might disincentivize people from like trying to stir up that controversy again. I also don't know how this Womb to Tomb biopic will approach this controversy, because apparently they did include this subject in the original cut of the film, and because of a legal contract from one of the victims' families, they were not able to include that person or their likeness, so they had to go do reshoots, and they're currently reshooting those parts of the film. And apparently it was like a significant part of the third act.
If it's unclear to you what the angle will be here, like the Jackson estate controlled this movie. They directed the film. They wrote the film. Like, everybody else is a vehicle through which, like, they are getting their story told the way that
like,
they
there's
want
no
it.
auteur vision here. This is not Pablo Larraín's Michael Jackson story, okay? Even if critics see through this movie, even if they go Bohemian Rhapsody on it, they say, like, this movie is just propaganda.
It might be lower than Bohemian Rhapsody.
It might really get trashed by critics. It might also get like middling reviews.
No, I think it may get a 48% on Rotten Tomatoes. Also, given Anton Fuqua's track record,
right? I think it's gonna sit in like the yellow on Metacritic. Even that might not be enough to tank it.
If it really did get like a 50%, it'd be like pretty trash.
I think it just needs some people to love it, and you know, critics included. I think some critics will go bananas for it, no matter what. Perhaps. I wonder if it's such an energetic, such an exciting film for some people.
For people who want to like it.
Biopics seem to have this effect on people. Like Bohemian Rhapsody had this effect.
People go in wanting to like it and just want to have fun and celebrate the thing, and like, this movie's their only goal is to make you go in and love him and cry for him and like sing with him, and it features over 30 songs, and it's like the back of a fucking CD.
And also, we're gonna watch him get literally reincarnated, because his nephew is playing him. Jafar Jackson is the lead role here, and apparently this is going to be an uncanny portrayal.
Based on footage that people saw at CinemaCon, they were like, my God, the dancing and all the mannerisms and the voice.
Like, the focus of this film and its campaign and its success is just going to be, wow, this really revived Michael Jackson. That was amazing. It was like I was watching him in concert, like he came to life again. And that's enough. I mean, I think that might be enough.
There was a Broadway, like, Michael Jackson show, musical thing, and it got 10 Tony nominations, and it won 4 Tonys, and it made a lot of money. I don't think that the general public wants to consider like the allegations and whether or not it's a problem as much as they want to jump up and down in their seats. There is a difference though in that, like, he died before that Finding Neverland documentary came out, and so a lot of people don't think it's fair to judge him after he died. I think the people who defend Michael Jackson are a lot louder than the people who are like, hey, he did these things. And so if you're looking who's going to win the online war, I actually think it's going to be his fans.
Well, I guess
they are louder and more
I don't
vicious.
really know how this online war even factors in, because like Amelia Perez, there was clearly a very huge online war.
Right, that's the thing. Well, if it makes $1 billion, we know how people feel, right?
I guess.
Do we need to think more about it? Do we
know how the public feels? Don't you think, for sake of argument, that like Critics' Choice or, you know, Golden Globes or Academy Awards could gatekeep the film because of this? Or are they going to say, well, even though I might not support Michael Jackson, this film had exceptional, you know, editing, or it's had great cinematography, and it had a great lead performance, and I can separate those things, and I will nominate accordingly.
Yeah, because it might just be easy to get on the film's wavelength like while you're watching it. I mean, the other red flag here is Anton Fuqua, who's never had a film nominated in Best Picture.
Right. And all of his films have like a consistent like 50 something on Metacritic.
But this movie does have an awards prestige package. You have John Logan writing it, who did like Gladiator and Hugo and just like Skyfall, and does all these Oscar big movies.
Yeah.
You have Dion Beebe doing the cinematography, who won for Memoirs of a Geisha, nominated for Chicago. Like, you just have a big Oscar package here. You have producers who produced Bohemian Rhapsody. The cast has Coleman Domingo as Michael Jackson's father, who a lot of people are anticipating will be nominated. You know, maybe you have Nia Long or Kat Graham as Diana Ross. There's a big cast here as well. The makeup might be undeniable. It might have to win makeup.
And costumes.
Yeah, costumes as well.
Very well production design, very well maybe editing.
You might have to give it sound and editing, yeah.
Critic reviews haven't been able to tank a lot of these biopics, like Elvis. It honestly, it kind of eludes me for how to see all of that controversy going and where it lands.
I mean, at the very least, Michael Jackson admitted to, inviting boys over to his house, which is like a Disneyland trap to hang out with boys, and he invited them over and he admitted to sleeping in his bedroom with them. He's the only celebrity in the world who could admit to sleeping in a bed with kids and have people say, but it's fine. And I don't think he went further. I think that there is just an effect around him. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah,
okay?
that somehow shields people from being able to see him as that. Why would any one person be beyond that? And why should we give someone the benefit of the doubt if they're in a bed with your child?
People would send their own children to go to his home. There you go. Michael Jackson in. We were in and out with Complete Unknown. We denied Elvis in the beginning of the year. We denied Maestro in the beginning of the year. This year I'm not doing it, okay? They love the music biopics, and this is going to be the most successful one of the year. All right, the next contender on the list is The Rivals of Amziah King. I put this on earlier today, and I'm honestly glad that we waited this long to film the video, because it just so happens that this film screened at South by Southwest. I barely knew it existed. I actually didn't know it existed.
No.
And then I saw a couple rave reviews, and I was like, what on earth is this? I did my investigation, and I said, well, okay then. So this is the director of The Vast of Night, which was a really strong and promising debut film. And this movie's got Matthew McConaughey, and he's playing a beekeeper guy who sings bluegrass with his community, and it also turns into some kind of crime thriller.
Yeah, apparently this is extremely feel-good, happy, Oklahoma country vibes, and then the second half is more, I guess, thrilling or gripping, and that's where the supporting actress really shines.
Well, she might be a lead. Maybe. It might be like a Haley Steinfeld True Grit situation.
And that character is played by Angelina Lookingglass. She plays Matthew McConaughey's former foster child who he lost touch with, and now they're rekindling their relationship, and people say she's an absolute standout.
If the movie didn't land in Best Picture, she'd be relegated to newcomer awards. But in Best Picture, she's kind of a co-lead, and it sounds like they'll probably campaign her in supporting just because she's younger. She's 20 to 21 years old.
And she would definitely be able to get nominated, I think.
Oh, if the movie was in picture, yes.
People say this film is absolutely wild, and I've actually seen some criticisms, people saying that the film is maybe too audacious, it goes in too many different directions, it maybe tackles one too many genres, bites off more than it can chew, or it's just over stylized. I've heard people say that perhaps the editing is just too much. I've heard some people say it's edited kind of like a trailer, but these are some of the more negative criticisms. And on the other end of that are overwhelmingly positive reactions of people who were crying during the screening, laughing, and who think it's one of their favorite movies immediately. Seem to really connect with it. On top of that, this film has commercial viability given that Matthew McConaughey is the lead. And it also seems like it is an entertaining crowd pleaser. So, the only thing that's giving me pause here, because there's so much good going for it, and some reviewers that I trust have reacted to it and they loved it, is that the Letterboxd score is kind of in a weird place right now where there's not enough ratings to see where that curve is going to land.
It seems
honestly, if the criticism is that it's over stylized or it takes on too many genres, I can think of another film that got nominated last year. People had absolutely no complaints about that.
There's a lot of criticism about the second half underwhelming people, or people feeling disconnected from it, but really it seems like there's people who think it's overrated or it's the best thing since sliced bread. And I am hearing people say Oscar buzz for the two performances, the editing is Oscar worthy, the movie just kind of says Academy Awards on it. So I'm thinking that this movie will appeal to the right people. It can be a little bit mixed, but we say this all the time, and we said it with Nickel Boys. Doesn't matter if some people aren't into it, the people who are passionate are super passionate. Now, unless South by Southwest is an overhyped fever dream, I feel like all this movie has to do is get picked up by a good distributor, which should not be hard.
Go to TIFF.
There you go.
And you're done. I think it needs to go to TIFF and release in the fall, though.
Yeah, sure.
I think importantly, this could actually place for an audience award at TIFF if it tries really hard to. We really need to pay attention to who picks this up. And, because there's no distributor yet, I don't think we can be too bullish about its awards chances. And especially because we have a relatively small pool of reactions.
Amelia Perez had worse reactions. I feel like I was also, I'm reading a lot of concerning things about Nickel Boys and how people aren't like connecting with this part of it, but
Yeah.
the passion was there. Like, this is also just a major crowd pleaser tearjerker. Some people are just so blown away by it. Like,
Right.
it is gonna stick with people. I see the package here. I see score, I see song, I see editing, like, I see things.
Yeah.
Directing even.
I figure why not put it in our top 10, right? Like, it seems to have about 50% odds.
I feel like it's better than that.
I can't say that at this point.
How about Life of Chuck? What do you think about this? Because I don't know if you actually have this in or not, but I'm looking at Life of Chuck and I'm saying, I understand that maybe this is just screenplay picture, maybe it's screenplay picture, supporting actor, editing, score. It has SAG Ensemble potential too. It won the People's Choice and it beat out the most nominated film and the Best Picture winning film last year.
Right.
God. People find the movie to be life-affirming and magical, and it makes them cry, and it's funny, and it's riveting at parts. And not everybody feels that way, but is it not enough people? I mean, does the People's Choice Award not show that there is passion for this film? Wouldn't it have gotten into adapted screenplay last year and probably been runner-up?
I saw Life of Chuck. You didn't see it. So in a way, you're like less biased than me, right? Which is kind of interesting.
I don't know.
Often I don't think you have to see the awards films to know that they're getting nominated. You just have to read what people say. The film is absolutely a crowd pleaser. It has like a very memorable dance sequence that I'm sure it will circulate the Twitter timeline, and people will watch it over and over again just because it's so fun and well choreographed. That's like important, you know. I get like there's a sort of virality inherent in that I will take into account because of how I saw The Substance do this year. It did well with audiences. Obviously, like the People's Choice Award speaks for itself, but there are people who thought the film was schmaltzy and it kind of looks like a TV movie. There's also not really like an actor in there that is a lock for a nomination. I know people have settled around Mark Hamill being the acting push in a supporting actor role, but it's not like totally obvious from my viewing alone that would be a guarantee, and I think it would only happen if it was definitely getting Best Picture. The film does have a very large appealing cast, and I could see it, you know, snagging like a SAG Ensemble nomination, but there's not really a large package for Life of Chuck at the end of the day.
Even if it was just picture screenplay, it could get in.
Yeah, but you just can't do that much with it.
That's what we said about American Fiction. We thought it was, you know, 3 noms at most, and then it got 5.
Didn't get amazing critic reviews. It's like a 60-something on Metacritic.
The Letterboxd is good though. Like it has
Letterboxd is good.
4.5s, your 4s, your 5s.
But there's not really another film to compare it to where you can say it's a slam dunk. The other thing is Neon has this, and Neon is planning to release this in the summer. That is a yellow flag at the least for me.
It's a yellow flag.
I mean, this thing could do well with an awards push, but like, what are they doing with it in the summer?
It's in June, no less.
In June.
Could fizzle out.
It really could fizzle out. It really could. I mean, this film could be a sugar high. If this was coming out in award season and had a strong push and it got like right after the festival, I think the timing could have been on its side.
Some people really love the movie. They find it very meaningful.
I know, but it's less true about critics.
Who cares about the critics?
Well, critics do have to play a role in pushing these
Critics'
films.
Choice would do it if it was happening.
Like when precursors come around, I don't think we're going to be seeing Life of Chuck popping up very much.
It could be an adapted screenplay.
See, that's the thing. Like I would want to believe that even critics groups could get behind it in certain categories. And I believe that about American Fiction, certainly Jeffrey Wright and screenplay.
Critics
but this one I don't buy as much.
Critics got behind like Complete Unknown and stuff. Like they just will, you know?
That was more of like a prestige biopic where the acting was like locked. Like you have to nominate those actors. Yeah, I really want you to think about that release date and also think about the fact that Neon has emerged from Cannes with an Oscar contender for the last many years.
The only Oscar contenders Neon's ever had are Palm winners.
But I feel like Neon's gonna have something else, and it's gonna take priority.
That's actually a good point.
Think about what happened with Sing Sing.
If Neon emerges from Cannes with an Oscar contender,
with the
Palm winner, then Life of Chuck is gone.
Exactly. And I also have to consider the box office here, because if you're gonna come out in the summer, you better do well. You better do decent at the box office. You better not be a bomb. I don't really know like where this film falls as a commercial play. Yes, it is appealing. I think if audiences do end up going to see it, they're going to be very happy with it. But it almost feels weird that this film went to Neon, because I feel like their audience like is almost interested in like kind of weirder or more off the beaten path fare. And this film feels like more down the line of like something a studio could have picked up and could have done something with. I don't really know where this falls as like a commercial film, and I think that's another variable. Like the problem with Life of Chuck is there are many variables that it still has to overcome.
Look, if I would
Release
say
date, box office,
if I knew
acting nominations, like how it's going to be respected by critics. Because think about the films that survive from the summer. They're considered the best film of the year.
yeah, they usually are really, really good, or they make a lot of money.
Like even Sing Sing couldn't do it because it couldn't make the money.
And look, if A24 is going to get 2 movies in, which they have, or a studio like A24, which is like Neon, both movies have to be kind of undeniable and very hard to not have them both in.
Right, like Past Lives and Zone of Interest. I mean, Past
so-
Lives, even though you could only get that 2 nominations, people love that movie so much, and it was like clearly one
they
of the
weren't
best
gonna let that
films,
one go.
but they couldn't let it go.
So yeah, I agree with you actually. I don't know if I'd have Life of Chuck in. I'm thinking about putting Avatar in. I'm thinking about putting Avatar out. Again, if we come back to the 50% rule, is this not like a 50% chance of getting nominated?
Avatar, Fire and Ash.
So here's the problem for me. Avatar: The Way of Water had diminishing returns from Avatar. It only got 4 nominations. It was picture, sound production design, visual effects. That's not really a big package. Are we just going to do that again and again and again? Because there's 5 movies at least? Like,
Yeah.
at some point,
and
it's
I
gonna
agree.
stop.
Like these Avatar movies can't get nominated for more than that, and it's kind of weird to predict that a film's going to get in on just that low count alone. And I also feel that The Way of Water got into a year where it wasn't that crowded. It wasn't that hard to squeeze into the 10.
My feeling is that if we waited another month, it might have lost enough steam to not get in.
Right. That's
However,
but this is coming
when
out at
is
the
the
right
movie
time.
coming out? It's coming out in Christmas. So when it's breaking in billions, nomination voting will be happening. So even if the movie is just all it's doing is riding another huge wave of hype, it's riding it at the right time, right? So that's still pretty good. James Cameron said that his wife was like inconsolably crying for like 4 hours after the movie, trying to explain to him how good it was. It's been said that he's trying to make this one, you know, more emotional, which he also said about the last one, and I guess that kind of worked.
No, I
on
think
some
he
people.
delivered on that. I can't help but think also that this might just have reactions of people going, this might be the best film of all, guys. James Cameron hasn't lost it. You have no right to doubt this man. Stop doubting him. He really does prioritize the utmost, highest level of quality in all of his films, right? Maybe it doesn't make sense to doubt Avatar, but I also agree that, like, you're really going to nominate, like, 5 of these films? 5?
I mean, my other question is, are people less excited given that there's been, you know, a 3-year gap between the last 2 films, whereas before there was like over a decade gap. There was a huge wait. Last movie has like a 67 on Metacritic and like a 76 on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, it's kind of freaking weak. And yet it got in though, right? But,
Right, 'cause
but there was more
they-
excitement.
I mean, they make $2 billion when they come out.
What if people are like, I'm not feeling like I need to do this again? Like, yeah, it's another good Avatar movie, but I have other movies that are a little more exciting for me.
Yeah,
I
but we
think
also denied the first that Avatar: The Way of Water would get nominated. And,
Yeah, I know. No, look, I think
it could be
it's-
our redemption arc.
I guess it feels more certain than other movies, just because we know what it is and we know what it can do.
When I look at the 10 nominees in the year that The Way of Water got in, I would say it was higher than Triangle of Sadness and Women Talking. In other words, it was probably number 8, maybe 7. In other words, if there's enough films that really blow people away, Avatar gets pushed down and it gets pushed out of the 10. But we don't know what the competition will be like.
I think I'll keep it in hesitantly just because I think
Yeah.
there's an okay shot. How about Deliver Me From Nowhere? This is a biopic about Bruce Springsteen. We're pretty sure that equals Oscar nomination for Jeremy Allen White in lead actor. We're pretty sure about that.
Yeah.
You also have, you know, Jeremy Strong is playing a manager or whatever. The manager roles don't usually work in these biopics, but he could be in for another nomination maybe. This is directed by Scott Cooper, who's known for Crazy Heart, which, you know, Jeff Bridges won an Oscar for that. But his other films haven't seen Oscar success. They can't seem to get above a 3.5 on LETTERBOXD. And I don't know, maybe this guy just can't quite get those rave reviews that are needed to break into the Best Picture race, which he is still yet to do. But of course, a music biopic could be the way to do it. How good do you even have to be? This sounds a lot more like A Complete Unknown. Michael is the Bohemian Rhapsody. I do like the sound of this movie, kind of, even though it's like another biopic, whatever, where it seems to be really focusing in on the creative process. And I think a lot of these music biopics do not have as much focus as this one seems to promise into just the nitty gritty, like creating one album and the inspirations that go into it.
And isn't it also more acoustic?
I mean, James Mangold, Baz Luhrmann,
they're more reliable.
Right. And they've gotten films in Best Picture before. So, and also this is 20th century. So is Avatar. They probably wouldn't get 2 films. I mean, I guess they could. I don't see why they couldn't, but that just wouldn't be typical.
The thing about it is that it's a likely actor push, right? Like Jeremy Allen White playing Bruce Springsteen. It's hard to leave that off your list, especially early in the year. I mean, is there a world where he doesn't get nominated?
No.
If he's like completely not considered?
No.
And if he's such a lock, then, you know, the movie following in Best Picture, I mean, it could just be okay, I guess, right? Like, if the movie's just okay, but then these movies tend to do amazing at the box office, and people fawn over them. Like,
what's the nom package here? I mean, you know, to be fair, Complete Unknown, we were like, oh, that's just going to get like actor and supporting actor and sound, and that's it. I mean, it got a lot more than that. This movie, you know, you could get another actor in there. I guess they could go for screenplay and sound. But this is definitely not a concert movie. Like, it's about him making the album. You know, it's kind of a good bet to just put the music biopics in, even if it's not likely that we'll get this and Michael. It's still likely we'll get one of them, right? Maybe putting them both in is a good idea if you're trying to get the most right possible. If you don't know what else to put at the number 10 slot. Some people with early predictions, they try to go 100%. They're like, oh, I need to have these Cannes films in, and I need to have like the film that's coming from here. But you can just say, hey, I'm going to put 2 music biopics in, and I'm probably going to get one right.
You just try to, maximize your odds. I think that's honestly the only way to do it, because, you know, we'll talk about Cannes and like the films that are going there, and whether, you know, we're thinking a lot about Cannes and the international films, the fact that we've had 2 in Best Picture for 2 years in a row. I absolutely have no doubt that we're going to get another international film in Best Picture this year, but I've seen people really struggle early to predict what the heck it's going to be. And people often fail at this task. Like they'll say, you know, a hero from Asghar Farhadi, it's his time. Usually going with a filmmaker who has a great track record and saying, like, finally this can be their breakout into Oscar.
Yeah, I don't think people are good at timing this.
It's just a gamble. We are thinking a lot about what Cannes films are going to be in the lineup. And, you know, hey, in this theoretical lineup that doesn't exist yet, what would I pick?
Sentimental value. I'm super skeptical over this, though, because I've seen people with the audacity to just throw this in the top 3 and say, like, oh, easily, okay? You are betting that Joachim Trier, who is probably, like, closer than we think for worst person in the world, is and in another universe, I feel like that could have gotten a Best Picture.
Yeah.
You are betting on him striking lightning twice in a row. You are betting on him rolling doubles twice in a row. You think that this is going to be the perfect redemption comeback where Renata Reinsve gets in and he gets his recognition, and it's going to be just as good as Worst Person in the World. It's just unlikely that he will strike gold twice.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we seen, you know, a filmmaker who's not consistently in the Oscars, their next film is just like, oh, it's back to, you know, not giving them awards attention. Like, it happens all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, I want this movie a lot. I love Worst Person in the World. There are some promising aspects here. One of which is that this film is a comedy. The 2 films that Joachim Trier made before Worst Person in the World seemed very kind of like heavy melodrama. I mean, I guess you could even go further and say that his other films were like that too, but the 2 before Worst Person in the World didn't really work that well on critics. But I think the comedy was a really winning aspect of that movie, and I'm glad to see that it seems to be back here. Stellan Skarsgård, I could see an excellent narrative for him to get his first nomination for this movie. He seems to have a really meaty role as the father.
Reinsve is the lead. Her character is Nora. It follows her and her sister as they mourn the loss of their mother and adjust to the return of their father, Gustav. Gustav is played by Stellan Skarsgård. Stellan Skarsgård's character comes up with a script that he wants his daughter, Renata Reinsve, to be in. She turns it down, and instead you get Elle Fanning cast in this role. I think this is actually in English, which wouldn't be Joachim Trier's first English language film. He made Louder Than Bombs. It's kind of hard to see where the weight from this film would be.
No, it's not. It's like a father-daughter reconnecting story. Like, it could be a heavy movie.
Well, just something that people consider, like, really significant.
It also seems to have this, like, acting and, you know, turning your life into art and, like, sharing it with other people and, like, wanting his daughter to be in that. Like, there's layers there that, you know, you could even argue would resonate with artists.
The deal is, if this film gets a really high 80 on Metacritic, or it gets in the 90s, or it wins a really big prize at Cannes, then it's in. It's not. I'm not resistant to this. We're just trying to see how likely is it that this film is like really great.
Neon's the other really strong part of it,
and it's going to be most likely going to be at Cannes. So the fact that
it's going
Neon's
to Cannes.
coming into Cannes with this film,
Neon has
people
this-
are going to say, "Oh, that's Neon's film from Cannes that they go all the way to the Oscar with."
Sometimes Neon comes into Cannes with the film. Sometimes they acquire the film at Cannes. They also have Alpha. That's really the only one that they have, and that's DeCorno's film, which it just is less likely than this one. So look, if you want to make a bet on what the Cannes film will be, your best shot is to take the Neon film that seems most likely.
I'm looking at the plot and I'm like, I don't know if it feels like a big enough step up to be like, that's his best film. Like, is that really what it's going to be? Because
Also, the
again, I think
comparisons-
when a film breaks into the Oscars, the first film from the director, it's got to be like their very best film.
Also, the comparisons to The Worst Person in the World. That's a hard bar to live up to. It's really difficult. Also, a lot of times when directors turn to English language films, they just don't end up being their most successful. We saw that last year with The Room Next Door. I don't know when the last time it was super successful. I guess like Gravity was
Triangle
super
of Sadness.
successful. Yeah, I guess so. That was a European movie, though.
But speaking of Cannes films, the other one I really want to talk about is No Other Choice.
Yeah, I like that one.
This is Park Chan-wook. Most recently, he had Decision to Leave, which was less acclaimed than The Handmaid's Tale and Old Boy, and both of those films are considered to be like modern classics. Decision to Leave was a very good film, and it just didn't catch on in the same way. Like
People were even really trying to get that.
Did it win a
predict
prize
that
at
one.
Cannes? Did it win?
I think it got director.
People were saying, this could be like the breakout for him, and they were trying to predict it before Cannes, and then even when Cannes happened, some people were saying, I think this could maybe still get director. Again, this is where I'm like, it needs to be their best film. It needs to be their most crowd-pleasing film. It needs to be their most acclaimed film. It would be even better if it won like the top prize at a festival. The bar is really high. Like Decision to Leave is a very good movie, but the bar is higher than Decision to Leave. So,
Honestly, this sounds really good though.
but this one, I something about this, I do think it sounds very good. So like, I care a lot about plot and I care a lot about genre when I'm trying to decipher, is this film going to be it? The thing with his other films is they're very plot heavy. They have many threads going at once, and they can be a little like mind-boggling to follow. Like I watched Handmaid's Tale like 2 times, and I still found that film to be like difficult to like grasp. Like I'm riding like a bull, and it's thrashing me, and it's making it kind of difficult to like hone in. And that's what people like about the Park Chan-wook's films. Like they're very fast paced. But this film seems to have like a more streamlined premise, perhaps. It's a dark comedy thriller. We're starting off in rocky territory already, let's be honest. It's based on the novel The Axe by Donald Westlake and follows a man who engages in a desperate hunt for new employment after being fired from a position he's held 25 years, and his strategy to get the next job is to kill people one by one. And apparently, like in the book, you kind of root for this character, even though this person is like a serial murderer. But this is kind of a fun plot too. It feels like great material for the director, and perhaps it has like a class, capitalism commentary that we really like to see in modern day that gives that film a level of relevance, right? Like Parasite or something.
Yeah, a bit more prestige. Decision to Leave, I think, was really like about those interpersonal relationships and their psychology.
If Fincher was directing this film, I would even say like, okay, hold up. This is like a murderer Fincher movie. It's like a crime. It would be very up his alley, but it'd be like, oh, this is like a Fincher crime. I'm not sure if this one gets in.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's really exciting. This one doesn't have a distributor, so if Neon acquired this, like, during the festival, I'd be like,
which they might.
I mean, to be fair,
like a very likely buyer.
Even if you kept track of Neon films as the way to predict the Cannes film, you'd be wrong most of the time anyway.
Right.
People were trying to predict La Chimera. They bought Anatomy of a Fall, and they came in with Perfect Days. Look, I'd love to see Park Chan-wook have his time.
In this theoretical Palme d'Or lineup, what else could be contending besides these 2 films?
Are we going to just go through those movies and just divert
I feel like it makes
the
sense.
order of the list?
I feel like it makes sense if you're strategizing because you want to diversify your portfolio.
Yeah, all right, fine.
And we're kind of doing it for the sake of diversifying our portfolio.
Malik's film might be going, it might not be done, and even if it does go, like, I'm not going to be predicting that one. Okay, this one's about Jesus.
I love Terrence Malick, but yeah, I wouldn't predict this for Oscars.
I am ruling out Jim Jarmusch.
He never...
The Dardenne brothers, good luck. Spike Lee is a film at Cannes. That's important.
That's big.
highest to lowest.
It's a remake of a Kurosawa film that's considered one of his best
Or like
films.
a reimagining, yeah.
Yeah, called High to Low. I mean,
It's kind of a police procedural. That's where I'm like, okay, I guess Black Klansman was sort of like this.
but Kurosawa's film is very acclaimed and people like, really love it. It stood the test of time.
That is not necessarily a great thing that it has such a big classic to live up to, you know?
In general, with remaking classics, people always ask, like, why are you doing this? Like, what's the point?
This stars A$AP Rocky. And Denzel Washington, I believe, is supporting to him, but also perhaps close to being a lead.
Yeah.
A$AP Rocky was really great in If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, so I don't doubt that he will be very good in the movie.
And we have Jeffrey Wright in a supporting role as well.
What's also nice is Matthew Libatique doing the cinematography.
It's also produced by and distributed by A24. So
It's got a good package, but you know, A24, like, it's not that tempting for me to try to predict two of their films when I think Marty Supreme is like the one that they already
Right.
have all that
That's a
money
good point.
invested into. Spike Lee, his only Best Picture film was Black Klansman. And people thought that The Five Bloods must be his next one, and it just did not happen. His movies need to have like a 3.8 or above on Letterboxd. It needs to be one of his best films. He's a little hit or miss. This could be a hit. I definitely think it could, but it's also a crime police type of movie, and that is not usually a formula for the Oscars.
I think the adaptation part's just throwing me off a little bit. Like it's being adapted from not a novel, but like a film that people love.
Also, one we can look at is The Mastermind. Kelly Reichardt's new film. Mubi has distribution on it. If Mubi didn't do The Substance, nobody would think about this at all. Do we have to take a Kelly Reichardt movie that seriously? I'll always go see the new Kelly Reichardt stuff. Her movies are always too slow for the Oscars. She made the most acclaimed film of 2020 in a pandemic year where if they wanted to, they could have gone for it in cinematography or adapted screenplay or whatever else.
Yeah, first
did
down.
not happen.
Didn't happen.
Just didn't happen. This is like an art theft heist movie. It takes place in the backdrop of the Vietnam War with Josh O'Connor. So it sounds like La Chimera.
It's also got John McGarra
Night
and
Moves.
Gabby Hoffman, Bill Camp, Alana Haim. Like the cast is really stacked for this one.
None of her films have really come that close, honestly. Like, I just don't think we can possibly predict if she'll ever get into the Oscar race. Least of all, call the film that is the one that will break in.
She could break in someday. There's absolutely a possibility for it. Like
Yeah, but I feel like the movie would have to kind of feel different from what she's done before.
maybe, but think about like Hamaguchi's movie Drive My Car. I mean, that wasn't really differently paced or compromised in any way from his like other films.
I guess that was kind of a miracle of that broke in, yeah. It being with the backdrop of the Vietnam War or whatever, like maybe you can argue that's a little, just slightly closer to what the Oscars want. Josh O'Connor, someday he's got to get nominated, I guess you can say. Now, what about Die My Love? Lynn Ramsey, there's something compelling about this one, and I'm seeing a lot of people predict this because it's got Jennifer Lawrence in it. And, you know, Jennifer Lawrence, anything she's in, she can get Best Actress consideration in a sense, especially a role that's going to be probably one of her most challenging and grueling and maybe one of her most acclaimed of her career. Because critics might go nuts for Jennifer Lawrence having a psychological breakdown in a Lynn Ramsey film. Lynn Ramsey's films are about people who have psychological breakdowns. And this one is about someone struggling with postpartum depression and being a mother. It has a great cast. Robert Pattinson, Nick Nolte, Sissy Spacek. I mean, those are all actors who, like, it'd be a great narrative for them to get another nomination or their first nomination. But if you go to Goodreads and you look at what this is based off of, it has like a 3.5, and people are like, yeah, this is kind of just a very grueling and depressing,
bleak,
novel.
extremely dark.
It just is this way the whole time.
I mean, her closest film to the Oscars was We Need to Talk About Kevin, which was only close because of Tilda Swinton in Best Actress. That film was about a woman whose son, like, commits a fucking heinous act. And it's just bleak and depressing, and that's like the point of the movie, is just making you feel like shit. She doesn't have sensibilities that align with like an awards movie, and good for her. Like, I'm excited about this film no matter what, but we have to realize like this film sounds exactly like the other films that she's made, in the sense that it's just, you know, the point is to be like awful and bleak and depressing. I tried to find how this could happen. It'd be awesome for Lynn Ramsey to have a moment like that, but she's not interested in it.
As much as Jennifer Lawrence may get some critics buzz, And if this is as a 90 on Metacritic, then we have to consider it for sure. And it could be one of her most acclaimed films. But even if it is a 4.1.
Is it palatable to like a normal person?
Yeah.
Probably not.
We could talk about Wes Anderson's film, The Phoenician Scheme. This one stars Benicio del Toro, who I've heard has a true lead role, and it's not just like an ensemble film.
That's a very good thing, I think, for Wes Anderson.
I think it is. Yet again, this is Focus Features, and they're releasing it in June, shortly after Cannes, just like they did with French Dispatch and Asteroid City. So this could easily just be like one of those two and get no nominations. Or, hey, maybe Wes Anderson's films have like a 1 in 4 chance of getting nominated from Budapest on out, and we're due for another one. But even so, it's a low chance. I mean, it is also an espionage thing. That's
the part that makes me go, oh, goodness. It's spy, action, comedy, crime, drama, thriller. Tagged on IMDb, take the tags with a grain of salt. It says dark tale of espionage following a strained father-daughter relationship within a family business. Twists revolve around a betrayal and morally gray choices. I mean, I'm not really sure what kind of sauce Grand Budapest Hotel had that like his other films didn't, that made it an Oscar vehicle, but this just doesn't really strike me that way.
The History of Sound is also expected to go to Cannes, but I would honestly be a little surprised if it ended up in competition, because Oliver Hermanus, I don't think is like a heavyweight filmmaker. So if it made competition, I would kind of raise my eyebrow a bit at that. And I'd say, oh boy.
Maybe they're just going to like slight British cinema because of that famous quote from a Frenchman that that the British have no cinema.
No, they don't like that kind of thing. That thing doesn't get into their competition. I mean, Living was Oliver Hermanus' last film, which was a well-shot, well-scored, well-acted movie. It was like a well-made thing. And this one is a period piece. It takes place during World War I, and it's got Paul Mescal and Josh O'Connor. It's about 2 young men setting out to record the lives, voices, and music of their American countrymen.
I think this movie might be kind of bland. Like, I personally thought Living was a little bit bland as well. I mean, honestly, it sounds like it's about the early days of audio journalism, right? Because they're going around to record people's voices. It sounds kind of touching, maybe sentimental.
Also, Movie has it, so...
Movie has that?
Yeah. I'm just not going to go out for this one.
Yeah.
The Secret Agent, I think, probably will go to Cannes, I would guess. It's more of a political thriller, though, about a man who is escaping a violent past in Brazil. It is also about, like I'm Still Here, the dictatorship of Brazil. And so maybe you could argue that film brought attention to something that now the Academy is paying attention to Brazilian cinema. I wouldn't use this argument. I don't think that it necessarily follows that because they embrace a movie from one country, that country is just like in the club and they can just nominate anything from there. I mean, I'm Still Here had a very big filmmaker who had a film with an actress nominated before, and it was about a really important true story. I mean, this is a true story as well, and Wagner Moura is in the lead role. Maybe he could get Best Actor at Cannes. But I can't predict a movie called The Secret Agent. The director did Bacurau, though.
Bacurau was really good.
Had a lot of acclaim.
I think this film has potential, but there's just not quite enough for me to go off of to predict it, I suppose.
There's Alpha from Julia Ducournau. Now, I've seen people argue that, well, The Substance got in last year, so now the Academy likes horror and body horror, and therefore they will nominate more of those. This is incorrect. Get Out did not result in other similar things happening. We didn't get any more social horror films. We got a very different horror film just now. Mad Max, did that result in action films getting nominated? Not really. Every once in a while, the Academy goes out of their genre boundaries to do something, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they like that genre now. It just doesn't. The movie has to be really special to do that. Now, Julia Ducournau's film, it doesn't actually sound like a horror film, necessarily. It's about a girl in school who's accused of having a disease, and it apparently is very personal to Julia Ducournau, and it may be about like the AIDS crisis, and I guess illustrating like somebody's fear of that. One of her parents is played by Tahar Rahim. My main issue here, aside from that Julia Ducournau's last film won the Palme, didn't come close as much of a masterpiece as Teton was. Films about children and the main characters don't work that well with the Oscars.
It could be Ducournau's best film. It also seems like it might be way less weird than Teton. I'm really excited about this one. Maybe the fact that it isn't pure horror means something. It's about a teenager who starts getting rejected by her classmates because a rumor spreads that she's been infected with a new disease. And because it's in the 80s, You put two and two together. It's about the AIDS crisis either directly or adjacently. I guess it's kind of all we know, right?
It sounds more like Raw.
There's no like gross thing about it though that I understand yet. I'm watching out for Alpha. I'm really excited for it. If it's at Cannes, I'm gonna go nuts.
You have Orphan from Laszlo Nemes, which is about a young boy after the Hungarian uprising of 1956, who's confronted with a brutish man who claims to be his real father.
Laszlo Nemes is the director of Son of Saul, which won the Oscar. He also had a film that came out more recently, which didn't have nearly the amount of acclaim.
One could see this filmmaker say that he's really got the chops, the stuff, and say that, you know, the subject matter here is like emotional and it's a period thing. Again, I would argue, though, that a young boy being at the center of it, just not making me easy to see this being like the Cannes breakout. But I am excited to see if Laszlo Nemes can, you know, hit that level of acclaim that he got with Son of Saul. We can talk about The Wave from Sebastian Lelio. The lead actress is a newcomer, and most of the cast is just not well known to American audiences. But it's a musical about the feminist movement on college campus. I have this in my international feature 5. I think it would premiere more likely at Venice. It has potential. I don't know what else there is to say. I mean, Jodie Foster is in a Cannes film called Private Life from Rebecca Zlotowski, but her films haven't really broken out in that big of a way. I mean, if you have this film being predicted, you're just saying Anatomy of a Fall again, because this is also a crime mystery. And I think that's just too direct of a comparison. Like, you don't get an Anatomy of a Fall happening all over again. You have the disappearance of Josef Mengele from Kirill Serebrennikov. It doesn't make that much sense to predict this, honestly, given his track record. It's not that he's not a very interesting filmmaker, but he's just a little erratic and his films can be polarizing. And even though the plot summary of this one, which is about like a Nazi doctor who was a fugitive, might make you think that this could be some kind of zone of interest, I just don't think that's what you're going to get here. You got Nouvelle Vague from Richard Linklater. And just real quick, Richard Linklater had a film that premiered at Berlin this year called Blue Moon that I've seen too many people predicting. It just does not have enough acclaim to break in as a Linklater film. But Nouvelle Vague is about the making of Godard's Breathless. You got Zoe Deutsch playing Jean Seberg. You have somebody playing Jean-Luc Godard. But my impression is this, you know, like Linklater's other films, is probably going to be kind of a hangout movie on the set of this production. I think it'll be
like really good, not great.
Good, not great. It'll be a good portrait of like the French New Wave. Critics might love it, but it's going to be slight maybe to like... like a normal person, I guess.
It seems niche.
And finally, Eddington is going to be at Cannes, the new Ari Aster film, which is a Western. So unpredictable to know what is happening next with Ari Aster. He veered away from horror a bit with Beau is Afraid. Very polarizing reviews. And here we have like some kind of Western. Maybe it's a bit of a comedy. I'm very excited for every Ari Aster film. I don't see this one being embraced necessarily. And it's apparently coming out in the summer too, which is not convincing either.
It's also paralleling modern politics in a very overt way. The synopsis is: sparks fly when Sheriff Joe Cross, played by Joaquin Phoenix, decides to run for mayor of Eddington after he refuses to wear a face mask at a local grocery store. Incumbent Mayor Ted Garcia is not happy, as he was led to believe he'd be running unopposed. It's an overtly political Western comedy, maybe horror, or is it just tagged as horror because it's Ari Aster? Emma Stone, Joaquin Phoenix, Pedro Pascal, Austin Butler. Huge cast.
There's also a film called The Doctor Says I'll Be Alright, but I'm Feeling Blue. There are a couple of those like insider bloggers who are just saying that they've heard that this is really good. They just keep hearing good things. So this is just that there's rumors that it's very good. It could very well be All We Imagine As Light for all we know. The director, the cast, like the plot description, none of it indicates, it doesn't point anywhere, but it's just based on those rumors. So we'll be looking out for that one if it shows up in the competition lineup. So Netflix's Frankenstein, Guillermo del Toro. This movie seems to have a lot of nomination potential. Really walking in the door, you can just sense costumes, production design, makeup, score, cinematography. Seems easy. Oscar Isaac's in the lead role. Jacob Elordi's Mia Goth's in it. Can Oscar Isaac get his first Oscar nomination? This is probably going to be very good because it's Guillermo del Toro. He got Nightmare Alley in, probably because people in the industry just loved him. He had some afterglow love from Shape of Water. He is a man who champions everybody's work, does a lot of Q&As. Really loved in the industry. That kind of thing can help you. And if you've already got a decent amount of tech nominations to start out with, that's a really good base to get your film into picture.
And we just had a monster film, Nosferatu, get 4 craft nominations, no doubt I think that Frankenstein is going to see similar success, if not greater.
Yeah, I don't know how this will play above the line. I just don't know if people will find that the Frankenstein story is like refreshing in this time or new, or maybe they'll feel like they've kind of heard it before and it's a really, really good rendition, but there won't feel like there's an urgency to nominate this. The tragedy of Macbeth didn't happen.
I think this film is going to be close. That's the thing. Like,
yeah,
I think this is going to be a top 15 movie all the way to the end. Like Nosferatu.
But what if it gets Pinocchio acclaim, you know? I mean, a lot of people didn't really know Pinocchio in that form that was so faithful to the original. But I don't know. I think that people might just think that they've kind of seen this. I just don't know if the interest is as high given that it's an adaptation of something.
Oh, I think people will be interested. I just don't know if it will be like a top 10 movie of the year.
But it has a lot of tech potential, so you gotta consider it.
Yeah, I'm definitely close on Frankenstein. I do kind of have a problem seeing anyone actually getting an acting nomination here. Like, I get that Oscar Isaac is the lead role. I do want to consider like a film from Netflix. Although with distributors, it's hard to, you know, try to play that game of like balancing one film per distributor, because they often will acquire films mid-season or at a festival, and we just don't know who that's going to be.
Hamnet. This is the one that is the highest on Award Expert that we don't have in. When I brought this movie to your attention like months ago, you raised some concerns with me that I think I kind of have come around to. It stars Jessie Buckley, and it's about her and Shakespeare, who's played by Paul Mescal, grieving their son. It's based on a novel. It's also directed by Chloe Zhao, who did Nomadland, all right? So this is like a huge Oscar bait package right here. My concern is that the plot just sounds like it's very, she's grieving, then she's gonna grieve some more, then she's gonna grieve some more, and it's kind of like relentless like grief.
Yeah. Like, in my head, this movie's like a little bit gray, and Jessie Buckley is like leaning against a tree, and the camera's like wide angle and like steady cam like rotating around her, and it's just like so interested in her grief. And I'm really basing it off of the plot description, based on the book, based on the source material. Like, I get that this has, you know, the production value with like the costumes, potentially production design, and then that performance from Jessie Buckley in the lead role, I think that is very meaty. It sounds like she really could break into the Best Actress with this. But I'm like, who is gonna love this movie that's so just about grief? Like, it doesn't really seem like it's about anything else. I don't know if this film seems very widely appealing. Maybe people will watch it and just go like, oh yeah, that was a heavy one. Also, why would people be excited to watch a film that's just about that? It sounds like Oscar homework.
I mean, they gave her Nomadland Best Picture, so it's got interest, probably. Lucas Zoll is doing the cinematography, too, so that's exciting.
Yeah. I'm just a little skeptical about the subject matter.
It might be kind of meandering. I don't know, that's my feeling about, yeah.
I mean, Nomadland had like, Americans really feel this is relevant right now.
Nomadland felt
like
new.
Give voice to, you know, the middle America.
It felt new. This is so down the line Oscar bait that I'm like skeptical in the way that, you know, Blitz or Empire of Light is just, is it just too Oscar bait? Is it just too straightforwardly like, okay, I see through this. I see that this is like an awards production.
It just feels, honestly, for me, it's not that it's too Oscar bait. It's just that it feels too slight.
Apparently Sam Mendes was going to direct this. I also feel like Nomadland having won Best Picture made people sit with that and think that maybe that film was overrated. It feels like her next film might get people might be a little harsher towards it. Sometimes you kind of feel that coming with certain filmmakers where like people are kind of ready to criticize them a little bit.
Out of all the Oscar tipped films that are like really obviously trying to go for Oscars, I think this is one of the safer ones to just say maybe not.
What do we think about Ann Lee? So this is Mona Fastvold's new film. She directed The World to Come, but she is most well known now for co-writing The Brutalist with Brady Corbet. She's his partner. Brady Corbet is co-writing this film with her and is also a producing partner. And this kind of has the goods. Like, this is a 17th century biopic about a religious figure played by Amanda Seyfried that is also a musical. So off the bat...
Well, I don't know how much of a musical it is, by the way.
It has original songs that Daniel Blumberg is responsible for.
Yeah, I don't know what the extent is, but Ann Lee, the person in her whatever Christian cult that she ran, because some people call it a cult. She was the founder of the Shaker movement, which was, I guess, part of the birth of like modern Christianity. And she was also known to be more accepting and more feminist than like other Christian movements at the time. So it was more of like a progressive Christian movement. And there's a lot of meat here for Amanda Seyfried to dig into with this character, especially with the singing. This person did sing and dance in real life, so I don't know how much of the musical elements is going to be like showing what actually happened and making that the music.
I think it is. I think it's going to be elevated because everybody who talks about this movie like calls it a musical.
And I think the instrumentation is going to be fascinating from Daniel Blumberg. I'm highly intrigued.
Yeah, I mean, The World to Come, I think, was a bit dull, but it had some of the right ingredients. Like, it was a well-shot movie. Also, the cast here is good. Like, you also have Christopher Abbott and Thomasin McKenzie and Lewis Pullman, with Brady Corbet being hot off The Brutalist and Daniel Blumberg too. I think that'll surely help the campaign and bring a little more awareness and also probably make it easier for them to get a distributor.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds too good to be true in a sense, or like too much that we're just seeing something that happened last year and saying it could happen again.
But what I'm doing
which is like that, you know, Mona Fastvold, who wrote The Brutalist, is going to have her time immediately after The Brutalist. But I really would base it off of like what this film is about. This has that kind of prestigious production value like The Brutalist does. It's got an intriguing subject matter.
It's a biopic with a filmmaker that is not interested in making like a super generic biopic.
Yeah, I mean, and the lead role in the center makes me think, you know, that could definitely come along for a nomination.
Amanda Seyfried.
We don't really know if it's going to be considered great.
But the package is there.
I mean, maybe Corbet struck lightning with The Brutalist, and Ann Lee just can't quite get there. We looked back at our previous predictions, and, you know, we had, like, The End in last year. The End from Joshua Oppenheimer seemed nice on paper. Movie kind of sucked.
And my question to you is this. Wicked's here. The Rivals of Amziah King is here, which is kind of a musical. And Ann Lee, which is probably at least as much a musical as Amziah King. Is it too much? I mean, last year we got two musicals, and that hasn't happened in many years. I mean, there is this neo-musical thing going on right now, for sure.
Yeah.
And also, The Wait. There's a Chilean film from Sebastian Lelio about the college campus feminist protests in 2018. That is also a musical. And then we also have, like, Michael and Delivery from Nowhere, so we have two music biopics as well.
Right. It is a lot, but we haven't really seen this kind of saturation of musicals in the Oscar race until recently.
I definitely could see, though, Ann Lee coming out of Venice. Doesn't have like a 90 on Metacritic.
Yeah.
Some critics are pretty into it, but it's not like a unanimous praise type of thing where everybody's fawning over it.
Right.
And that just wouldn't be good enough.
The bet would be that it's one of the very best films of the year, like The Brutalist. And on top of that, The Brutalist had an immigrant story at the heart of it. I mean, I think this film doesn't quite have that narrative potentially going for it.
Apparently The World to Come isn't her first film either. She had a film called The Sleepwalker in 2014, which got mixed reviews. So the Catherine Bigelow film from Netflix. Nobody is predicting this, and I kind of don't know if we should disagree with them. Because I feel like the only reason people have to not predict this Catherine Bigelow movie is that, well, Detroit didn't really go anywhere, but Detroit was produced by Annapurna, and it came out in like the early summer, so it's not that applicable, and not every director hits with every single movie. And Detroit was also good. It was still a good movie.
Yeah. It's a political thriller that will follow how the White House responds to ballistic missiles being launched at the United States. So it's got that political commentary.
It's just in line with her other films, except
No, really, it's not like in
not
Iraq.
A true story. The writer is not Mark Bull, though. It is Noah Oppenheim, who wrote Jackie.
And the cast is Idris Elba, Rebecca Ferguson, Greta Lee.
It sounds like it's at least September 5.
What if the film's just well received and people are like, yeah, we can't doubt Bigelow. Like, why were people thinking this was going to be bad? I think at least it's going to be a very good film. But maybe, I guess it could be like Widows or Detroit or September 5. People shouldn't have it completely off the radar and pretend to be surprised when this film comes out and people are saying it's quite good.
I mean, it's going to have, you know, some serious moral and ethical dilemmas. You know, again, like September 5, which was an Oscar bait movie that, like, if it had a higher profile and it didn't have this sort of looming conversation around it that it didn't want to address and people felt weird about that, then maybe that would have been a bigger Oscar contender. If everybody was predicting this, you would too. The only reason people aren't predicting this is because nobody else is pulling the trigger for no reason. Maybe that it feels like it's sort of limited location. Maybe it's a little less exciting.
Yeah, I mean, if it's kind of if it's a chamber piece, and I don't know, if it doesn't feel like something that we haven't seen before, which it's probably not. What I think it might be is a dissection of our approach to nuclear weapons and our reaction to it. Probably addresses like the looming World War III.
But the cast and Catherine Bigelow, man.
Yeah, it'll be a really good thriller. It'll be a really solid thriller.
And it feels like Rebecca Ferguson or Greta Lee or Idris Elba or somebody could get some buzz for this too. Like,
that's what would have to happen. Is there would have to be an acting prospect.
I don't know. Sometimes when nobody's predicting something that seems to make a lot of sense, there's sometimes
like
a reason.
Things.
But no, there's also not. Yeah, like Poor Things, it was the opposite though, where nobody was predicting it for no reason. Also, we don't have a Netflix movie in the 10, unless you want to put this in, or Frankenstein. The other Netflix films that I have on here are Ballad of a Small Player. This is Edward Berger. Now, some will just see, okay, Edward Berger, like, he's in all the time, every time now. He's got 2 in a row. He's going for 3 in a row.
Yeah, like, we shouldn't have
hat
doubted him for Conclave. You know, we even saw the word thriller on there and we got scared. Rest assured that was an easy layup of a film to get into the Oscars.
I mean, that was one of the 3 that we predicted.
The fact that he makes very good Oscar bait should make every film he makes on your radar.
But you look into this movie, this is based on a novel, which is about like an expat who's hanging out in China, and he's just gambling, and he's depressed, and he's drinking, and he's making bad decisions. And it kind of sounds like Queer. And I don't think people are like obsessed with the book. I think Colin Farrell's going to be incredible in this. I think it's a super complex, layered role that he's going to nail. And you have Tilda Swinton and Fala Chen in supporting roles, but Fala Chen is the one where people actually know who she is in the book, and I would predict her over Tilda Swinton. There's also like a ghost element of this, like a supernatural element. I just don't quite look at this as being as Oscar bait a package as Conclave or All Quiet ended up being.
What's your vision for what this kind of movie is going to be? Because you looked a lot into the book.
I think that people might find it to be a little aimless.
Some guy in Macau who is gambling, his gambling addiction, right? I mean, what else is it about? Like, where does it go? Where does that story go?
I mean, this is when his past and his debts start to catch up with him. So it's like a guy who thinks he can kind of skirt on, like, and gamble and, like, you know, lucky his way out of things and things. And it's
more of a character study.
No, it's totally a character study. Yeah, that's what it is. It is tagged as a mystery thriller. I don't really know what the mystery is based on what I've read, but people aren't, like, crazy about the book. Yeah, I just think it's more of, like, a character study. I don't think it's as much of, like, this high production Oscar bait. It'll probably be good and entertaining, and Edward Berger's reliable.
The general vibe around it doesn't feel as Oscar tipped.
I feel like Edward Berger can't hit every single time, right?
He does seem like a director that could hit many, many times in a row. But again, I think we have to take every project on its own level and think about the genre, think about the plot.
Train Dreams. After watching this movie, I was like, that's not really a movie that the Oscars would go for, but due to the fact that Netflix bought it for over $15 million,
which is nuts,
I had to consider whether or not there's something here, and I feel like there might be something here. So this has very good critic reviews.
Yeah.
And I feel like the first screening undersold it in terms of the reception, and it kind of got better from there. Some critics are really championing this movie, where I wouldn't be surprised if they were trying to vote for it in, like, you know, their respective regional groups at the end of the year, and that may even, like, snowball a bit. I could see this film even gathering more critical momentum. It just kind of feels like that.
The film is a 97 on Rotten Tomatoes, 36 reviews, 8.2 average rating. We're looking at a 3.7 on Letterboxd, but honestly, it could go up to like a 4 based on how the curve is looking. This was like one of my top 3 at Sundance. It didn't feel like a film I haven't seen before. It would be kind of like if you put First Cow and like The Tree of Life together. It's got really great craft elements, like the production design and the cinematography are quite astounding, and the performances are all really good, but it is really low-key. It's pretty subtle, it's pretty slow, moves at its own pace.
It's very poetic, it'll throw some people off in this way.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a film that most people are going to be like, I want to see that. I don't know, it didn't really check enough boxes for me to think that's going to be an Oscar film. I mean even A Real Pain was more like a movie you could show to anybody and they would love it.
This would probably have to be one of the top critics' picks of the year. Like Nickel Boys level acclaim. Joel Edgerton is great in it, and he is kind of overdue for awards recognition, and maybe critics will try to go after him, but I could easily imagine the Best Actor race being too crowded for him. William Macy is really good and very showy, but he maybe has 8 minutes of screen time, 8 to 10 minutes,
like 8 to 10
much.
minutes. You could give it a bunch of nominations, but there's no single one that stands out enough. Like, I would really want to at least see Joel Edgerton as like a very viable Best Actor contender. I think he's a little bit weak, not in terms of performance, but from my impression of like, would that break into the Oscars?
Adapted screenplay is a bit of a maybe too. I feel like that it could
Screenplay is
kind of
always
be,
maybe.
So I don't think that one is top 10 material, but it's kind of worth looking out for. Like if Netflix if all their other contenders failed somehow and they decided that they needed to mount the big push on this movie, I don't know. I just don't see that happening. But if
if they did do it, which again, buying it for over $15 million is a huge signal that they want to push it for awards. Because the
it's
film
also,
doesn't
like,
make
why?
sense outside of an awards push. I mean, that was just a really big swing. Like, it wouldn't even be that much on my radar if they didn't acquire it for that price. I think it's worth pushing. It's worth seeing where it goes. But to me, it seems like an outside shot.
The Lost Bus. So this is kind of like the Catherine Bigelow movie in a way where we know what Paul Greengrass does, doing political thrillers and such, morally complex political thrillers. He has a film that is about Matthew McConaughey saving children from a wildfire in California, and America Ferrera is a major character in it as well. You know, Paul Greengrass's last two films, one was News of the World, which got a few nominations in the pandemic year, but couldn't make it into Best Picture because it was kind of mid. And then 22 July, nobody cared about. This actually has the same cinematographer as 22 July, which I watched a trailer for that, like, it looks less well shot than all of his surrounding films. Some are noticing, hey, the wildfires were a really big deal this year. This film seemingly has very relevant timing. And
Same with Train Dreams. Train Dreams is another film about wildfires. So.
Sure. It's reasonable to weigh that in, right? But I think if the movie is mid, or if it's not great, it's not happening. They're not going to just let it in and shower it in awards and give it Best Picture just because it's about fires in California. If it's as good as Captain Phillips or close, then there you go, I can get it.
Listen,
Matthew McConaughey has another contender though, doesn't he? With Amziah King.
Yeah, but listen, I can't shake the idea that this film is going to be also mid. And the reason is Paul Greengrass does these morally complex thrillers really well. This one seems very simple, very basic. It's about a man who heroically saves children. And maybe it will be entertaining, maybe it will be harrowing, but that's kind of it, right? Like, what other story is there to mine here? Why is this such an important film? I'm just feeling pretty lukewarm on this one, honestly. This one seems like a straightforward hero story, and especially after News of the World, which I thought was also a very simple, straightforward story. Also about, you know, kind of a person who just does good. I think this is what we're gonna get into for. I can't quite see it as an awards player, especially with Matthew McConaughey having possibly a bigger contender on his hands with Amziah King. Yeah.
The Smashing Machine. Dwayne Johnson, Emily Blunt, for sure they could be players. Emily Blunt is his wife. It could do makeup. It could do screenplay. That would be like kind of the whale package, right?
This is directed by Benny Safdie. It stars Dwayne Johnson as an MMA fighter. And there's one image on the internet of him in makeup in the ring, and he looks quite unrecognizable. Dwayne Johnson is really going balls out for this one. You know, he's transforming, and there's definitely at the least a Best Actor play here.
The story is quite dour. It sounds like The Wrestler, and we've seen that formula work. Benny Safdie is going to make a very good film, I think, but it may just be a little bit grim. It may be a little bit dark. I mean, I guess Foxcatcher kind of worked for people too, as dark as that was. And The Whale was a dark movie. There's definitely potential here, especially like if it just happens to be one of the best films of the year, then it's kind of Oscar bait in a way, being a biopic. It would be nuts if both the Safdies had their films in and they were both nominated and directed. That'd be like insane. But I just think that Benny Safdie, especially, you know, with what we saw from The Curse, his style may just be a little bit more patient. I mean, between this and Marty Supreme, this one's kind of the downer.
They're definitely going to push this for awards, and I think Dwayne Johnson is inevitably going to get buzzed for Best Actor. Inevitably. That he comes just short of the nomination at the end of the day, though, isn't it?
I think he'll get in. It's in the teens. I would put it that way. It's in the teens. Jay Kelly is the final Netflix film I have on here. It's the new Noah Baumbach film. It is said to be, you know, around 2.5 hours, so it's a similar length to Marriage Story and White Noise, and those two films indicated that Noah Baumbach is more ambitious with the way that he shoots his films, and it seems like he's trying to tell stories that have more weight.
But I gotta say, this one does sound a lot like his works prior to Marriage Story. It sounds like an adult coming-of-age drama. It's sort of like funny, it's comedy drama.
And yet it's still 2.5 hours. And that's
Adam
not
Sandler
really the
and George Clooney
correct
are starring in
length for a light fare film. George Clooney in the lead role and Adam Sandler in supporting. I mean, there you go. There are some acting prospects. It'd be very,
That's
very
true.
nice if Adam Sandler could get, finally get his nomination. And Noah Baumbach could be the one to do it. George Clooney, like, he's known for getting nominated for films like this, like Up in the Air and The Descendants, which this could be similar to those. Eve Hewson is in a supporting role. She could be a standout for sure. She was great in Flora and Son. You have Laura Dern again. I feel like they're not going to go for her twice. He co-wrote it with Emily Mortimer, who's also in a supporting role here. It's about two middle-aged friends who have a weekend reunion.
This is where I'm thinking it's more like While We're Young.
Linus Sandgren is shooting it, buddy. Linus Sandgren.
There could be an upgrade in the cinematography, sure, but subject matter-wise,
I don't know why you wouldn't just compare it to the Meyerowitz stories, because that does have
Sure.
Sandler in it, but
that's like also, yes, I would also compare it to that.
I think that we're probably going to get something between that and Marriage Story, because I think Noah Baumbach got better. I think he upgraded. I don't know if there's enough evidence to say that Noah Baumbach's going to happen again. I don't know that this type of movie gets in all the time, whereas Marriage Story was sort of like, you could have said it's like a Kramer versus Kramer, although we didn't predict Marriage Story early in the year. We were kind of unsure why other people thought, oh, this will be the Baumbach breakout, and then it was.
I mean, someone who was kind of trying to sell the film said this is like a modern-day Jerry Maguire. And that film got Best Picture. They clearly see it as an awards film.
Yeah.
It also
but again, that kind of feels like...
It also is like a very big Best Actor contender.
That kind of charming comedy drama getting into picture doesn't happen a lot anymore, though, I will say.
Well, it's like Alexander Payne. I think if this film has, like you said, an elevated style, that helps a lot. Netflix has really no shortage of contenders this year, which really seems bloated compared to the last couple of years. This is possible. There's acting potential, there's screenplay potential, but the comedy drama, like adult coming of age thing keeps me from, throwing it into like the top.
It probably should. Then there's Sorry Baby, which was, one of the great films out of Sundance. This and Train Dreams, I think, are the only ones that have a shot.
And also, Sorry Baby, I personally feel was the most memorable of Sundance. And it was also the most critically acclaimed film from like the Variety poll that came out of the critics. I haven't seen this approach to the subject matter from any other film, even though it's been explored in other films.
That's why
the way
I think
it's done is very unique.
People will continue to call attention to it and why it feels kind of significant. And I definitely think there's a screenplay prospect here. I have to predict this, at least for now, in screenplay.
It's a very likable movie. It's breezy. It's really funny. But also, like, Ava Victor being in like the lead role and also having directed and wrote the film, it feels very personal. It feels very much like her sensibilities.
I could see some people finding it to be like slight, which I don't agree with at all, but it's just a movie that kind of thrives in subtleties and doesn't have much explosive going on in it.
The best studio pairing, I think, for this film is A24, and they picked it up.
Yeah, except if they release it in the summer, it's over.
I think they could revive this at fall festivals. The problem here for me is maybe putting together how many nominations it could get, because I'm open to this as a Best Picture movie. Because it was really good. Its prospects are just picture and screenplay.
So some people do think it's an acting prospect for Best Actress, and
that's like a long shot.
My issue is just that I think that people will view this as like, well, she wrote this role for herself, and she's kind of playing herself, and it's too easy. Critics might go for this movie, though. Or it'll be treated like worst person in the world. Like, I don't know. I also wonder if A24 is pretty sure about something like Marty Supreme, if they just won't really throw that much support behind this film, which is just more unlikely. It could be like Past Lives, where it gets picture screenplay, but I think Past Lives' reaction was overwhelming. There were just so many people that were inevitably going to have this movie in their top 3 at the end of the year. I don't know if it's as much of a number 1 slot movie as like a Past Lives was.
This film doesn't really have like a mega punch at the end. It doesn't really have the typical like plot roller coaster that you'd go on, which makes the film what it is, makes it really good. It's kind of like just sort of freely moving from scene to scene, and it leaves you kind of like on a lingering note, not really like Past Lives where everyone's crying at the end.
It might just be easier for people to say, you get your screenplay nomination for this film, like, we'll see what you do later, like, you're young, we don't need to nominate you in like director and stuff. Yeah, I just think the package is a little slim, and I think A24 seems like if they're gonna go all out on something, there's got to be a few more prospects.
Well, they already have their big horse, don't they? Right? So,
seems like it.
This film kind of gets overshadowed by something like Marty Supreme. I do have my eye on it as a potential breakout, but that's what really gets me. Like, it couldn't break out into that many categories, could it?
Now, The Roses from Searchlight, you may be saying there's a huge flaw in your predictions, Oscar expert and Brother Bro, and it's that you haven't talked about a Searchlight film yet. We did this last year, and honestly, we didn't know A Complete Unknown was coming out, so we could have thrown a real pain in. That probably would have been pretty justified because of how close it was, I guess. But I still am not just going to predict the Searchlight film for being a Searchlight film, because for all we know, they acquire something that makes more sense than what they have on their plate.
If they didn't have A Complete Unknown, then they probably would have gotten a real pain in.
Maybe.
We don't
know that. We don't know that. The biggest contender seemingly they have is The Roses, and I just can't quite get there with this one. So this definitely seems like a TIFF premiere or maybe Telluride type of play. It's directed by Jay Roach, who did Bombshell and Trumbo, and it stars Benedict Cumberbatch and Olivia Colman. Immediately off the bat, you may be thinking, well, that seems like Best Actor and Best Actress. And,
right.
To be fair, Jay Roach's past 2 films were also biopics, and the people that got nominated were, like, in biopic roles. I guess Margot Robbie's wasn't really quite portraying somebody like that.
Well, this isn't a biopic.
Yeah, this is not a biopic, and it is based off of a novel that was adapted into a film by Danny DeVito called The War of the Roses. And The War of the Roses, people thought that was a very solid film, and it starred Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner. If you wanted to back then, I'm sure you could have nominated those two, but like the movie, I guess it just didn't like quite have the goods. You watch the trailer and it seems funny and charming, and you get like this rivalry between this couple that's probably really fun, and I can imagine Olivia Colman especially eating in this role.
It's basically about how ugly divorce is, and I think at the time people were like, oh wow, this is really eye-opening and exposes the harsh realities of divorce. But I think in the time we're living in, like, people are aware of the trials of divorce and the toll it takes. I don't know if it feels like as urgent to see and celebrate a film like that.
But they weren't celebrating this film back then. Like, it didn't get any Oscar
even back then.
nominations. It seems more just about how it's kind of this fun rivalry between these two.
Also, the book is very well known, but it has mixed responses, and people say the movie is like a better adaptation of the book and does like more justice to the book than the book does to itself. So I feel like it's maybe a hard one to do like really well.
Tony McNamara is doing the script though, and we know that he did Poor Things and The Favorite, and he did the series The Great, which has TV awards attention, I guess. And what you can imagine him doing well here is the insult comedy, like 100%. But I don't know that he alone with Jay Roach, who's kind of
he's reliable though.
He's like a reliable,
Hired
pretty
gun.
good with actors, but doesn't have much of a style. Although the cinematographer did Tar, so there's that. But yeah, I just can't quite get there with this. I think it seems fun. I don't know that it seems substantial. Maybe Olivia Colman is a player.
There's a couple of comedic actors in here too. Andy Samberg and Kate McKinnon. Like, it doesn't seem as dramatic as Marriage Story, and they're kind of like trying to balance comedy into it. I think this is to be taken seriously for acting awards and not as much in the Best Picture category.
Yeah, I don't know if I care about this like comedy drama remake.
Now for Searchlight, I mean, did you really find nothing else right now that they're
Searchlight also has Rental Family with Brendan Fraser.
Maybe that's like a big old
This
gem.
is a random TIFF movie.
It follows a lonely, down and out American actor living in Tokyo. He starts working for a Japanese rental family company to play various stand-in roles in other people's lives. Along the way, he forges some surprising human connections and discovers unexpected joys within his built-in family.
Probably charming, and like they get along, and it's a little bit silly. Like, I just don't know why anybody would think immediately that this is like an Oscar movie, other than that just Searchlight has it. But Searchlight has plenty of movies every year that just aren't that.
Yeah, it seems like a nice, likable film.
The other Searchlight film is This Thing On?, which is directed by Bradley Cooper. And this is about a couple's marriage that crumbles as they pursue separate paths, with Will Arnett's character exploring stand-up comedy in New York City, while Laura Dern's character, I assume, is rediscovering herself. This is co-written by Will Arnett and Mark Chappell.
I think it's much smaller than Bradley Cooper's other films. He seems to be taking a step back from that high caliber Oscar bait. There's a quote from Bradley Cooper. It's like a little comedy that Will Arnett is the star of, and Laura Dern and Andra Day. It's a great cast. That's what he said. It's like a little comedy. And I think this will be a really enjoyable film. And I love Bradley Cooper as a director. It strikes me as too slight to be an Oscar play, but I'm really excited for it. Now, if this is Searchlight's whole slate, I mean, do you really want to be a diehard and say, I have to pick one of these films? Or do you want to maybe wait and see, do they pick something up at a festival? Based on these films, you could gamble it, you could try to put one of them in your predictions, but you could also just wait and see if they get something else.
You got Late Fame. This is directed by Kent Jones, who did Diane, which I thought was very good and had a really strong lead performance from Mary Kay Place. The filmmaking here is super, indie, and I think that he's going to stick true to that. I don't think we're getting anything too flashy here, but the reason this is on my list at all is because Willem Dafoe is in the lead role, and Greta Lee has a big role as well. Willem Dafoe is playing a poet whose work captivates a group of young creative people, and Greta Lee plays this actress that I guess is kind of the main central relationship here. So here's how this movie gets into Best Picture. Willem Dafoe needs a nomination for it, and it's really good. And Greta Lee needs a nomination, and maybe Willem Dafoe wins an Oscar. Okay?
Oh, also, Sammy Birch did the screenplay.
Oh, yes, Sammy Birch did the screenplay.
Who wrote May December. And May December was her debut feature screenplay. That was a big deal. May December had a crackling screenplay. Absolutely deserved that Oscar nomination. That makes this film really exciting, too.
The book has a 3.75 on Goodreads. One Goodreads user described the book as a delightful, melancholic novella on the reawakening of dreams and aspirations, soothed asleep by the grayness of ordinary life. And this sounds up Kent Jones' alley from what I have seen. Yeah, this movie's max package is 2 acting awards, picture, screenplay, and I guess if it's incredible, then director. It's not getting any tech nominations or anything like that.
Yeah,
but
right.
Honestly, I really would have to consider Willem Dafoe for this, because if Willem Dafoe is excellent in a drama from this director, I feel like he'll get at least some serious critics' attention, and for an actor like him, that seems like it'll translate to Oscar love whenever he does a super serious role and a very down-to-earth role. Nothing cartoonish about this whatsoever. You really do have to consider Willem Dafoe here. And again, if he's nominated for Best Actor, there could be a push for him to win. I'll just mention that too. Although it's not really a transformation.
I mean, you have to be a lock. You can't just barely get in there and then get pushed to win. So I don't think he's gonna win for a film where he's not in Best Picture.
But I'm saying if the movie gets into Best Picture.
Oh, well, yeah.
It sounds like a critics movie.
Yeah. It sounds more like critics are going to really eat it up.
It says it's seeking distributors at Cannes Film Festival. It's possible that Willem Dafoe could bring the movie in if critics adore it. Yeah. But we'll see. Ella McKay from 20th Century. This is James L. Brooks' first film since How Do You Know? And this is a director who's had 3 films nominated for Best Picture in the past. Some are wondering if this film will reignite people's passion for James L. Brooks, and it'll be just as big a contender as he was used to having back in the day. It stars Emma Mackey as Ella McKay. Probably this film's Oscar campaign relies on whether or not she is just an absolute superstar in this role, and you have to nominate her. It is about a young aspiring politician who's trying to take over as governor of her state. From what it sounds like, maybe Woody Harrelson is the incumbent governor who kind of sucks.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis is big.
It's probably her mom.
Ayo
Edebiri, Albert Brooks, Kumail Nanjiani, Rebecca Hall. It's got a really stacked cast. It's not clear how he's approaching this film, or if it's going to be just a whatever movie. And I don't really know anything about him or what his style is like, or even if he has a style.
This movie could be like Election.
So after a really hot streak in the 80s and 90s, coming back onto the scene in the 2020s, I mean, I can't really think of an actor besides Todd Field who had that kind of comeback. And Todd Field didn't go and do any rom-com.
Todd Field didn't ever do anything that didn't
make sense for him.
Make a hit with the Academy on some level. Predicting filmmakers who have had a few losses to come back and kind of strike gold again, it doesn't work that often, I would say. Especially if it feels like their movies made more sense in a different time. Kind of like we said earlier, these charming comedy dramas don't seem to work that well anymore. And The Holdovers is this rare exception where you can kind of recapture that. And I think that took a lot of skill on Alexander Payne to actually accomplish that.
I still think, though, that this will be a comeback for James L. Brooks. People will consider it one. It does seem kind of poised to be a very good film.
It seems better than How Do You Know, at least. And the cast is good. And Jamie Lee Curtis is always a great asset on any Oscar campaign.
Yeah.
It does seem like a tiff hoot, and it seems very easy to root for. It's about a young aspiring politician who's trying to take down the guy. And
kind of the obvious modern day politics.
People might feel like it's a movie that they need. Oh, this is a movie we need right now. I might just argue that that kind of charm is really tough to kind of captured. You feel like this kind of movie would work better in the early 2000s.
You know, there's some potential. We'll have to see. I think this would be like a total TIFF play, so we'll see how it does at TIFF.
It's 20th Century, which indicates that they think it's a commercial play as well.
Because they don't really produce like indie Oscar movies.
Then it would go to Searchlight. Pressure is another Focus Features film. This is kind of Oscar bait. It takes place right before D-Day during World War II, where James Stagg, played by Andrew Scott, must deliver a weather report to the Allied High Command determining the feasibility of D-Day. And Brendan Fraser is playing Dwight D. Eisenhower. Carrie Condon's in it, and Chris Messina's in it. This is a British movie, and so you can kind of go from there and be like, yes, you know, the British are always making these like kind of on par World War II era movies that are, you know, they're good. They're not spectacular.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're really good. Like, this could be The Imitation Game on its best day. The director did a film called Hotel Mumbai, which actually has a 3.7 on Letterboxd, so pretty good. I don't know if I can take a leap on this movie, but, you know, there's something to it. It's kind of Oscar bait.
I feel like we're getting into the territory of, we're just kind of listing a lot of whatever movies that inevitably will play at TIFF and then not really be talked about again. And it's kind of because they have like a notable actor in them, or maybe like the director has done a few films, but the really exciting ones that we don't even know about are what's going to hit unexpectedly. I'll give an example of a film that I think could be really great, but I'm predicting it's going to be a mess, and that's Mother Mary, which I think we had in the top 10 last year, where we were like flirting with it in our top 10 last year.
What makes you think it's going to be a mess?
Mother Mary looks kind of sick. It stars Anne Hathaway and Michaela Cole.
Got original songs from Charlie XCX and Jack Antonoff. So, you know, that'd be a fun little original song nomination.
Apparently, at the Melbourne International Film Festival, Lowry was kind of teasing his film, and he said, "It's a weird, weird film. I'm in the edit room and I've been wondering, what is this movie? I know what I set out to make, and that is indeed what I've made, but it is so wild. It's a movie I'm sure will provoke a lot of strong feelings in every possible direction. It feels very true to who I am, close to me, but it's surprising me in ways that I did not anticipate." The Green Knight and A Ghost Story were some of the most fascinating original films of the last decade. But what we realized last year when we were trying to predict this, we were trying to kind of talk ourselves out of it, is no film of David Lowery's has exceeded a 7 on IMDb. Like, they are appealing to that indie A24 audience, and that is it. They don't really reach beyond that barrier, that bubble. And I think you have to do that. You have to not be polarizing to that extent to be an Oscar contender. And from what he said about this one might be the most polarizing out of those films. I mean, those weren't really polarizing, I would say. I think they were actually really critically acclaimed. But this one really might be. I think it sounds fantastic. The performances are going to be amazing. The costumes look stunning from a couple of images that I've seen. But I can't defend this as an Oscar film as much as I want David Lowery to have a moment like that. And as much as I think the actors, you know, could be amazing.
Then there's Caught Stealing. We have a new Darren Aronofsky film on our list.
It's amazing it took us so long to get to this one.
Yeah, this is based on a book that people said was quite a page-turner. But it just doesn't really fit into the genre of Oscar films. Like, this is a crime thriller. It's about a former baseball player who finds himself immersed in the criminality in New York during the 90s, and it stars Austin Butler. It looks kind of like a raggedy movie where people are running around in like the wrong parts of New York City and getting involved in all kinds of shady shit.
Even if people think this is a really good Aronofsky film, I don't think it would be tipped for awards.
I mean, Austin Butler might be fantastic in this. I'm very excited for him. I think he's a very exciting actor, and he's going to kill it, I think.
That's true.
Zoe Kravitz has a role. Regina King has a role. You know, Matthew Libatique is back doing the cinematography. And the guy who wrote the book wrote the screenplay, just like, you know, what happened with The Whale. Sony Pictures releasing is a bit of a weird studio, I guess. They had The Woman King, they had Saturday Night. Like, they just are not successful a lot of the time for some reason.
It's expected to be released August 29th, so there's no, at this current moment, there's no ambition to go to festivals.
That's bizarre, if that's true.
Yeah, that's kind of like a yellow flag if you're thinking about awards. You know, the other yellow flag would be that it's a crime thriller. So, and also Aronofsky, his films as of late have definitely tended to polarize, right?
Yeah, but he's gotten, like, he gets people in. And what we said last time with The Whale was that when he's not writing his own movies, they tend to fare better with the Oscars. And he's not writing this one, to be fair.
I think this will be a little more mainstream, I guess you'd say.
I don't know. Always excited for a new Aronofsky. I think there's too many yellow flags on this one. You've also got The Bride from Maggie Gyllenhaal. So you got Eleanor the Great. Scarlett Johansson's directing it. Apparently there's like good word of mouth on it. The only reason this is here is because Actually, this shouldn't really be here. The only reason it's here is because it's the only Sony Pictures Classics film that I can find right now. And June Squibb might be a Best Actress play for it. It seems charming. It's about an old woman who makes a new friend who's 19 years old, and June Squibb would be the oldest actress nominee ever. This also might premiere at Cannes. Probably out of competition, I would assume. What do you think about F1?
Well, we got the follow-up to Joseph Kosinski's Top Gun Maverick, but this one stars Brad Pitt, and it explores Formula One racing. So there's a lot of racing here. They strap the cameras to the race cars. They filmed at actual NASCAR tracks with real audiences. Like Brad Pitt would go in there, they'd do a couple scenes, they'd shoot a little bit.
Yeah, they're doing the Top Gun thing on the ground this time.
So a lot of this is, okay, we've been there, done that, but Top Gun Maverick was more impressive because you went into the sky. The second thing is that the movie looks like a little bit bland. Like, we do have a teaser for this.
It kind of looks like a video game.
It looks really clean.
It just feels like it's trying to recapture, like, this Top Gun Maverick magic. And where I
think it sets the bar, like, exactly where Top Gun Maverick is, and it's like, can you get there?
You can't. No, it's not going to get there. Joseph Kosinski also, like, he kind of struck gold with Top Gun Maverick. Like, that Top Gun Maverick's not happening again. Like, that was a one-time thing. I don't see this movie as having, like, the level of heart and warmth of Top Gun Maverick.
It probably gets, like, sound, right?
Oh, it's going to get sound.
Sound, maybe editing. Maybe editing as well.
I just don't see it. Like, I think that this is a commercial movie. Roofman from Paramount. This is the new Derek Cianfrance movie, and it's about the rooftop robber Jeffrey Manchester, who is avoiding capture, and he did so in a Toys R Us for many years. Channing Tatum is playing this rooftop robber. He robbed a lot of McDonald's, so he's robbing places that people in the audience are like, yeah, but that's all right, right? And apparently he's a very gentle guy that people liked in real life. So Channing Tatum, this could be one of his best performances, and on its best day, he gets into Best Actor. I don't know if I see this as being an across-the-board awards type of contender. Probably a TIFF movie, I guess.
I think Darren Cianfrance is an exciting filmmaker, but doesn't really sparkle. Doesn't really have a shine to it to me.
Amazon MGM has Hedda, which is a reimagining of a stage drama from 1891. It says it's reimagined in an epic and emotional way. Tessa Thompson is in the lead role. She'll probably be doing a lot. It's directed by Nia DaCosta, whose filmography includes Candyman, Little Woods, and The Marvels. Hilda Guðnadóttir is doing the music, and Sean Bobbitt is doing the cinematography. That's promising. I'm excited to see what Nia DaCosta can do, because she's been a filmmaker, like, quote-unquote, on the rise for a while, but it seems like she's kind of gotten caught up in the whole Marvel thing. I definitely saw some talent there with Candyman, but it wasn't fully realized. We're still waiting to see if Nia DaCosta can pump out, like, a really great one for us. I guess you can stick the Edgar Wright film on here called The Running Man, which is based on a Stephen King novel, and it's kind of an action sci-fi thriller. It's releasing on November 7th, so it's got, the right release date. It's about a game show called The Running Man, which has people chased by murderous hunters around the world to win money. So this is going to be bonkers. It's going to be fun. It's probably a commercial play. If this was like Edgar Wright's best movie, then he could overcome all the issues with this being like an action sci-fi blockbuster. And Glenn Powell is in the lead role, so that's cool. Katie O'Brien's in it. The Running Man was also made into a film in 1987, has a 3.2 on Letterboxd, starred Arnold Schwarzenegger. So like, it was an Arnold Schwarzenegger thing. But Edgar Wright will make this his own, I'm sure. Edgar Wright's last film was kind of a dud, but I think people would like the opportunity to nominate him, if he produced something worthy of. Clara and the Sun is a new Taika Waititi film. He really flopped with Next Goal Wins, even though that was right after Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah, I mean, if this were happening before Next Goal Wins and after Jojo Rabbit, I think people would be taking it very seriously. Just because we're like, oh my god, what's Taika gonna do next? People really tired out from him, especially from Next Goal Wins, which I thought was just an okay movie. I think people completely lost their infatuation for him.
But this doesn't sound that great. It's about a robot who eases the loneliness of those who she lives with. So Jenna Ortega is going to be like, are you sad? I am here to cheer you. I don't need that. I don't need it personally.
Wait, why are you being so harsh towards it?
I don't need to watch a movie where Jenna Ortega is playing a robot and it's trying to be
a robot girl designed to prevent loneliness tries to save a heartbroken family of humans. So Amy Adams is in it. I mean, she's made some questionable choices in recent years with her roles.
It's based on a novel by Kazuo Ishiguro, who, people like the book. I don't really
Also,
care about
Natasha
this one.
Lyonne's in it, Steve Buscemi's in it. Like, it has a really loaded cast.
This one's not happening. You could talk about Wake Up Dead Man, the new Knives Out movie. I mean, look, I'm not predicting this for anything except for screenplay right now. I'm sure not. I guess you can argue Glenn Close can get her Oscar for this.
Well, she could get a nomination.
Maybe.
Like,
But-
being in a Knives Out movie. That makes sense to me.
I mean,
About
this
it.
would have to be the best by, like, you know, a measurable amount to get into
Yeah.
Best Picture. So,
the third Knives Out film, I don't know.
just good luck, you know. The collaboration, we still have the collaboration. I mean, this is not going to get Best Picture. At best, again, it gets Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, and we're going to leave it at that. The collaboration, you know, the ball's in your court. You have to come to me at this point. I don't believe that you exist. You need to show up at TIFF. So there's a Christy Martin film who's a boxer, and Sydney Sweeney's playing her. This is directed by David Majode. This is probably just a Sydney Sweeney push. I have no reason to believe at this moment that it would be more than that, but she could be an interesting player. Whitney Springs, we don't know if this is going to be Paramount or if it's just going to Paramount Plus or if it's going to get a theatrical release. I don't see why it wouldn't get a theatrical release, but apparently there was a poster on their website that had the Paramount Plus logo on it, and that would really suck, because this movie is from writer Vernon Chapman, who created Wonder Chosen and Xavier Renegade Angel, absolute madman, and it's being directed by Trey Parker of South Park fame, and is also being produced and apparently stars Kendrick Lamar. It's about a young black man interning as a slavery enactor who discovers that his white girlfriend's ancestors once owned his. I don't know if that character is played by Kendrick Lamar or what's going on here, but it basically sounds really awesome, and apparently it's a musical, and I'm very excited for it. And I would love to see this get a theatrical release and be just like an outrageous, like absolutely bonkers, zany musical event. It's apparently coming out on July 4th, and I'm kind of concerned if it goes to Paramount Plus. I don't even know if it's worth mentioning like as an Oscar movie at all, but it does sound very original and exciting.
I think that could be an Oscar film. I weirdly feel like that's fine. Why not? If it got like an 88 on Metacritic, which it
wouldn't.
could.
No, it wouldn't.
Why not?
That's insane. I've seen a lot of people predicting A Big Bold Beautiful Journey, which is Kogonada's new film, and we're all excited for Kogonada, but apparently it's coming out on September 19th. It's gonna be like We Live in Time, but it's like a fantasy romance adventure movie. My sense is that it could be mid. I think people are predicting it because they see Margot Robbie and Colin Farrell, and they're just trying to like put people in Best Actor, but
There are also rumors of test screenings, and those screenings not going very well.
you have the drama from Christoph Borgli, who directed Sick of Myself and Dream Scenario, so I am excited for this movie. I've seen some people predicting it for nominations, given that it has Robert Pattinson and Zendaya in the central romance. But the fact that this is a romance with Robert Pattinson and Zendaya should tell you that this is a young people's movie. Challengers couldn't get in. That's a valid argument to make. A24 has it. It's a young people's movie. At the Sea is the new Cornell Mondrusco movie, which stars Amy Adams as a woman who is adjusting to life after rehab. So it's kind of like The Outrun. It's the director of Pieces of a Woman. Maybe Amy Adams will be very good in this, and she could be a contender, but probably not a Best Picture thing. I would say All That's Left of You is worth mentioning, which we saw at Sundance, and it just had the audience in a clapping frenzy after it was over and in tears. But this movie will not have American distribution ever because No Other Land couldn't get it, and American distributors are not willing to touch any film that is sympathetic towards Palestine in any way. Even though this film takes place entirely before the October 7th attacks and is just, you know, a very honest portrait of multiple generations growing up in Palestine, I'm concerned about it, but it has like the goods in a sense, is all I can say. But I don't really, it also doesn't have a huge nomination package. Like, I think that the director was really good, and she could be like a supporting actress maybe, but then I don't know, screenplay director, screenplay picture, that's it.
No, I get it. I mean, but I do think it's an international play, and it does come across as a more like palatable audience movie. It's going to be I think the biggest film to come out of Palestine perhaps ever, like to hit US audiences or in the last couple decades. But yeah, like who's going to distribute it? You know, I mean, I think it will be submitted from Palestine.
We can mention Toe, which is based on a true story of a homeless Seattle woman who fought her way out of tow company hell to reclaim her life and car after receiving a huge and ridiculous tow bill. And she is being played by Rose Byrne, who's going to have a great year with this and If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. Simon Rex, Ariana DeBose, and Octavia Spencer are in supporting roles. So that's cool. This will probably be a TIFF movie, given that there's a strong cast and a sort of unproven like director. That's kind of where these types of movies tend to go. and it's just on my radar. We gotta mention Materialists, I guess, which is the new Celine Song movie, but I don't have any confidence in this one as an awards player. I just heard mixed things from test screenings. I feel like that's the word's kind of gotten around on that. It just seems like a decent rom-com, and it just doesn't seem like it's measuring up to Past Lives at all.
It's Dakota Johnson, Chris Evans, and Pedro Pascal, and it's, you know, it's a woman who's between two men. And it doesn't sound like better than Past Lives. It doesn't sound like on the same level, but I am still hoping that it will be good.
I will not be predicting Superman. I will not be predicting Kiss of the Spider-Woman. I will not be predicting Fantastic Four.
Blue Moon, definitely not.
I will not be predicting Blue Moon. I've truly looked over everything that I can even comprehend here. I don't think Pressure from Roman Garbus is a thing. I don't think 28 Days Later is a thing.
I mean, there could be a film in here that we don't even know is coming out, right? Like, we think it's coming out next year, suddenly it gets moved, or it really hasn't been talked about, like it's just totally under the radar. And of course, the films that don't really have any recognizable actors are even harder to spot, but we do get some of those films in Best Picture sometimes. Let us know your thoughts, let us know what you think is happening if we missed something, and we will respond in a members-only video. Don't forget to update your predictions in Award Expert.
Thank you for watching, thank you for subscribing.
Which Frankenstein movie do you think will prevail?